Welcome everyone to the Phoenix Report. I'm Jack Connor, and this is going to be another deep dive movie review where we go through classic movies scene by scene, not in like a strict commentary sense where it's like it might not match up in real time, in terms of how you're watching it, but this is more of just sort of a deep dive into movies that people ask us to do, and this one has been requested to me by a lot of my friends, a lot of listeners, and I could definitely see why. We are talking about Back to the Future, the original movie from 1985, one of my all-time favorites. It's hard to begin, just how important this movie is, but today I won't be doing this alone because I'll have a buddy of mine and a frequent collaborator of mine through various different musical projects. Please welcome Gabe Vermund.
What's up, Phoenix Report?
Not much, man. So thanks again for doing this. You did the School of Rock review with me earlier.
School of Rock is great, but Back to the Future, I had the VHS tape, which shows my age, of mainly part 2.
Right. Right.
I always had like immediate access to part 2 because it was like in a particular slot at my home. So like I would always be watching it like constantly.
Okay, yeah, you had mentioned that to me. Now I want to go through. Now what's sort of your personal history with Back to the Future? Obviously part 2 is your favorite. You've told me, but like, what is your first memory of it? Like, how did you discover this movie?
My brother, I remember he gave me he started me watching the beginning, and I had caught it like right when Marty was being almost felt up by his mother in the family dining room.
Right. So like you had first seen it because your brother was a fan of it?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
And we had the VHS tapes. The Back to the Future Part 1 and 2 were always easily accessible. I always loved Part 2 because of the flying cars. But Part 2 is nothing without Part 1, of course.
Of course. And it was really similar for me in terms of I would always go over to my cousin's house, my cousin Rick, and he would have parts 2 and 3 on VHS. Didn't have the first movie for some reason. Don't know why. But when I first saw part 2, I must have been like 5 or 6. I just thought it was the coolest thing I had ever seen. There were flying cars. There was, the way the doors on the DeLorean opened. I was like, oh my God, like, why are they not making these?
Right.
And like, oh my God, I wanted a hoverboard so bad as a kid.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. So,
I have a feeling my luck on a hoverboard would be about the same as on a skateboard, which is basically I can't even stand on it without.
Oh yeah, well I mean you look at these things like as an adult now and you realize like, oh my God, like they would be killing machines. Like there's no way that like how would that even work? But like as a kid you just think like, oh my gosh, that'd be so awesome. I mean just the whole idea of like thinking about the future and what could happen when you're a little kid and seeing that for the first time, it just me it just opened up my imagination like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just fell in love with it instantly. So it's so just over the years, it's always been one of my favorite, I guess my favorite trilogies. And to this day, a lot of people look at Back to the Future as being a perfect film or being a perfect trilogy. Now I don't know if perfect is the right word, but I mean it's definitely it's way up there, I think.
Yeah, it is. Like it's the only reason why I can't call it perfect is because like each one follows a very specific formula.
Mm-hmm.
So like by the third one, you kind of know exactly what's gonna happen. That there's always that knock him out, wakes up next to his mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That happens in each one, and then the chase scene. Even then the third one, it's still still there. It's still the same basic principle.
Yeah, no, there was a formula happening. There were definitely some recycled things, but that was also part of the charm of it, I thought.
Exactly.
So I mean, again, there's no such thing as a perfect movie, but obviously, when people point to one, this is definitely an example that people use.
Yeah, this and the original Star Wars trilogy, I think, are two of the best trilogies. And then
They're certainly among the most beloved, and I think
yeah,
I do like the fact that in today's day and age, where everything is being remade and everything is being spun off, that they haven't gone there.
yeah,
And Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale have specifically said that they don't want to make any more Back to the Future movies. They don't want anyone else to do it. That like they told a story and they're done.
yep,
Now, of course, there have been other like various media, like comic books and
yeah. Comic books are great.
the comic books, which I still want to read, by the way. And there are video games. There was an
It's
animated series.
The video game is terrible. It's just you're basically walking and then talking. The Star Wars Episode 2 of video games.
Gotcha. Oh wow. Okay.
Sitting around and talking and walking and talking.
Interesting.
That's a honest trailer reference.
Okay. Thank you.
The Star Wars Episode 2, but
Gotcha. Okay. I was trying to see where you were going with that, but
yeah.
All right. Anyways, but this first movie, it became such a pop culture phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it really went beyond, I think, what anyone was expecting it to be.
Yeah.
But like between the two sequels, between the Saturday morning cartoon show, which was a favorite of mine growing up,
Right.
I loved it, and now there's a musical, there's like I said, there's video games, comic books, over 35 years later, it's still one of the most beloved movies ever.
Yeah.
So. So obviously it was written by the Bobs, Zemeckis and Gale. It was directed by Robert Zemeckis, and supposedly they came up with the idea of it in 1980. Up until then, the two of those two guys had been writing partners together, and they wrote and directed 3 movies that were pretty much box office failures.
Yep.
One was I Want to Hold Your Hand, which was about the Beatles. It was sort of like a Beatlemania thing that came out in 1978.
Great movie.
Is it really? I've never seen it.
I might be thinking of A Hard Day's Night.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Those are way two different movies because the Beatles were actually in that.
Yeah.
This would have been much later, but I guess about Beatlemania
Yeah.
is I Want to Hold Your Hand, and then there's 1941, which is obviously a World War II thing. I think John Belushi might have been in it, and like they had a lot of like big names in it, but that came out in 1979. And Used Cars in 1980 that starred Kurt Russell.
Mm-hmm.
And again, none of those movies did particularly well.
Yeah.
And supposedly
Spielberg produced 2 of them. I'm not sure which 2, but when they I might be getting a little ahead of ourselves, but when they brought him the script for Back to the Future, he said he was interested in producing.
Oh yeah, no. Well, I mean, You're absolutely right because the Bobs, they were friends with Steven Spielberg, and they were kind of at the point where it's like, oh man, well, we had 3 like bombs in a row. We're hesitant to attach our name to Steven because we don't want to bring him down and just be accused of like, oh well, it's Spielberg's buddies. Of course, they're going to get their stuff greenlit.
Yep.
So that was part of it. So but I think once Spielberg saw it, he was like, yeah, like let's make this.
Mm-hmm.
As the story goes, Bob Gale in 1980 had visited his parents and took a look through his dad's high school yearbook. Mm-hmm. And he had wondered whether or not he and his dad would have been friends in high school because they both had very different interests at that age. That was a concept that really kind of got his imagination going. And apparently Bob Zemeckis was also inspired by hearing his mom tell conflicting stories about her childhood that he thought, well, this may or may not have been true.
Mm-hmm.
So originally they began their draft in 1980. They originally pitched it to Columbia Pictures, to their president, Frank Price, at the time. Now, they had several different refinements to the original script. I could go through Wikipedia and see what some of the early ideas were. But I mean, there was a lot.
One of a really fascinating one. There's I have the Ultra HD trilogy. One of the interesting ones was instead of the clock tower, they were going to go to a nuclear test site and use the explosion to get the energy they needed to go back forward in time.
Right.
And they storyboarded it out and everything. It was like, oh, this is way too expensive. But
Yeah. Which is like, as we'll get to later on, it's like I wonder if that would have been Doc's backup plan had the clock tower plan not worked out. You know, I think that he would have some contingencies,
right,
in place. But after some script refinements, Frank Price, the president of Columbia at the time, he had turned down the script in 1981 because at the time the most successful teen comedies were like very like R-rated teen sex comedies. You had stuff like Animal House, Porky's, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and all the studios thought that Back to the Future was just too tame of a story. It wasn't edgy enough. It didn't quite, it wouldn't have made any money. And so the script ended up getting rejected like 40 different times. Mm-hmm. And there were some other time travel movies like The Final Countdown and Time Bandits that didn't really do particularly well either. And Disney had famously turned down the script because of the scenes with Lorraine in 1955 making advances on her future son unknowingly. Hey. Disney was like, no, we cannot make a movie about this. So they said no as well. But yeah, like once, but I think it wasn't until Robert Zemeckis directed Romancing the Stone, and that ended up becoming a bigger hit. Then he had a little bit more leverage. Mm-hmm. So once they reached out to Steven, who by this time he had his own production company, Amblin Entertainment, which was under Universal. Yeah. They had managed to get the rights back to the script from Columbia, which is kind of weird. Like I don't know how Columbia would have had the rights if they turned.
I think because they sold the script to Columbia.
Right.
So like if you sell a script to a studio, then they purchased it and then they own the rights to it, so they can do whatever they want with it.
That's so crazy how that works.
Yeah.
But so yeah, they finally got the rights back from Columbia, and Universal had said yes, and producing it under Amblin Entertainment, and they were off to the races at that point. So obviously Michael J. Fox was the original choice to play Marty McFly, but as the story goes, he was on Family Ties, which is at the time was one of the biggest sitcoms in the country. At the time, Family Ties producer Gary Goldberg was against it. He didn't want to let Fox out of the contract. Now I'm trying to remember, like, when did Teen Wolf come out? Do you know?
Shortly before, I think in 1984.
Okay, so yeah,
that's how he met the guys in Back to the Future. That's how he sort of heard about it, and he wanted more than anything to be.
And a lot of the sets and the locations that they filmed Teen Wolf at ended up being used for Back to the Future, weirdly enough. So yeah, Michael J. Fox, he had done some movies at this point. Mm-hmm. But obviously, Alex P. Keaton being on Family Ties, that was his big claim to fame. So there were several different like actors who had read for it. I had heard that like Charlie Sheen had read for it.
Imagine Charlie Sheen.
There was Charlie Sheen, John Cusack, Johnny Depp, Ralph Macchio, John Cryer, Ben Stiller,
nice.
Peter DeLuise, Billy Zane, who obviously ended up being in the movie as one of Biff's guys,
right?
George Newbern, Robert Downey Jr., Matthew Modine, Corey Hart. Oh, the singer Corey Hart was apparently. Yeah.
I was about to say, I'm like, huh.
Like, but it says he declined to audition. But I guess they reached out to him or something.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Gary Goldberg did not let Michael J. Fox do it because there was a point in Family Ties where like Meredith Baxter, who played the mom, who played Mrs. Keaton, she had to leave. She was having a baby, so she had to take time off from the show, and Gary Goldberg thought like, oh, there's no way if Michael J. Fox leaves, then we're done.
Right.
So the two front runners ended up being Eric Stoltz and C. Thomas Howell. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, they ended up going with
Stoltz.
With Eric Stoltz.
Yeah.
Because he had done the movie Mask that same year, 1985. Mm-hmm. He was a very good actor, very like serious, dramatic actor. So they ended up shooting like about 70% of the movie with Eric Stoltz.
5 weeks of principal photography had been done. There's some footage of him like doing the parts and all the movies.
Yeah, I imagine there's got to be like deleted scenes, like footage out there, with Eric Stoltz doing it. I guess it's never been officially released, but
On the DVDs on the Blu-rays I was telling you about, they did show a little bit of footage with him.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen those. I've seen those documentaries as well.
Yeah.
So that's so wild to think that they got that far in the movie before recasting their lead actor.
Yeah.
I mean, for one thing, it's hard to imagine anyone else playing Marty McFly than Michael J. Fox.
Yep.
Because so much of it was just him being himself, really.
Right.
But I guess ultimately they decided that Stoltz, who was a great actor, but was just didn't quite have the comedic sensibility, just wasn't what they were looking for.
Yep.
And they ended up firing him, and supposedly he was like really method on set too.
Right.
Which has to be annoying for everyone else. Like he was going around making sure people called him Marty,
Right.
So he's one of those guys.
Yep.
But that's how it happened. And I think Leah Thompson and Eric Stoltz, they worked together in another movie, Some Kind of Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I think that happened later on.
Probably, yeah. No, that's how Leah Thompson had heard about the part, is that she had worked with Eric Stoltz on another project.
Like I said, it really annoyed the cast and the crew, especially Thomas F. Wilson, who played Biff.
Right.
Yeah. Which I totally get it. Like, if I was an actor or a crew member and it's just like, dude, you're acting. You don't have to be him 24/7.
Right.
I don't know. But I guess it works for some guys. But
yeah.
Once they finally made the decision to replace Eric Stoltz, Steven Spielberg, I guess he convinced Gary Goldberg to let Michael J. Fox read the script. And I guess Gary Goldberg admitted to Fox that he was keeping the script from him. But once Fox read the script, well, I mean, he actually agreed to do the movie before even reading the script all the way through.
Right. Yeah.
So he was that into it. I think he just really wanted to work with Steven Spielberg too.
Right.
I think it was from January to April of 1985 because they were trying to get it under the wire so they could have that summer release date. So he filmed his parts for Back to the Future while simultaneously filming Family Ties. I mean, this dude was not sleeping at all.
Yeah.
It was crazy the amount,
like he would until 2 a.m. and then sleep for 4 hours and then up at 6 a.m. to do one or the other. I forget which.
Oh yeah, he had to have crew people helping him back and forth, and just it was a whole thing. So that's how that whole thing got started, and a lot of the downtown Hill Valley, the town square, was shot on the Universal backlot.
Yep, I've seen it.
They filmed all the 1955 scenes first, before the set was switched to 1985.
Right.
And I was curious, I wasn't sure how that affected a lot of the reshoots that Michael J. Fox had to do after Eric Stoltz was let go, because that would have added. I mean, I think it added another $7 million to the production.
Yeah, definitely made it go over budget.
For sure, and there were a lot of scenes where it's they kept from the original footage with Stoltz. I think when Marty punches Biff in the diner. It's the close-up. Supposedly, that's Eric Stoltz's fist hitting Biff in the face.
That's awesome.
Just because it was a close-up and, you can't really see him, but, if you look closely enough, you can kind of tell. But,
right.
According to Thomas F. Wilson, that's Eric Stoltz's, fist, punching him in the face.
That's very cool. I never knew that.
So
it's one of those things you'll probably only see if you go frame by frame. And
right.
Compare the hands.
Yeah, it's super deep cuts. If you really want to get if you really want to nitpick about it, that's how you could do it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess that's it as far as how the movie came together. Mm-hmm. Did you want to get started with have anything else that you knew about going into it, or do you want to get started with the movie?
Not really. The music is an interesting topic in that they were big fans of Huey Lewis and the News, and so they kind of asked him to write some songs, and one of them was originally a kind of slower ballad type song.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
Yeah.
So the two Bobs, they were big Huey Lewis fans?
Yeah. And so they asked him, it's not a bad song, but it's not quite the tone we're going for. And he goes, "Oh, you need something a little more upbeat, right?" And it's like, yeah, exactly. And then that's how
I'm trying to think what some of Huey Lewis's hits were before Back to the Future with.
Do you believe in love?
Okay, yeah. Was this before the heart of rock and roll is the beat?
I think it's after that.
Okay,
if I remember correctly.
So I know This Is It, and there were a couple other songs he had after that.
I think Working for a Living.
Okay, yeah. So he was already doing his thing, before Back to the Future.
No, he was pretty big, but like Back to the Future really like catapulted him.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Back in Time and The Power of Love are just iconic. All right. Well, anyways, yeah. So up until recently, this movie here in the States, it was streaming on Peacock just up until recently. Like just a week or two ago, all three movies were streaming on Peacock. As we're recording this, it's July 7th, 2022. So who knows? By the time you're listening to this, they might be back on Netflix here in the States. Internationally, I don't know where it's streaming. Who knows? But I mean, you would think NBC Universal, it would be right on Peacock. But you want to get started with it. So those of you following at home, like I said, this isn't like a strict commentary track. So, but if you want to kind of start the movie, however you're watching it, whether it's on DVD, Blu-ray, 4K, streaming, however you're watching it, we're just going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start the movie. And for those of you following along, that's what we're doing. So now, yeah, you get the typical Universal graphics that head up, not before it became a little more jazzed up by part 3. But
right.
Yeah, the opening scene here is done with very little fanfare. Like, you almost forget that it doesn't start with that iconic Alan Silvestri score.
Yeah.
It's just the sound of ticking clocks.
Exactly.
Which is a little on the nose for a time travel movie, but sure, I'll go with it.
Well, it was also very hard to shoot because they had to that scene where it shows everything we need to know about Doc Brown, just in 5 minutes of screen time.
Exactly.
And everything you need to know about Marty in even less time.
Oh, for sure, it absolutely did what it was meant to do. I wonder if they must have had some different ideas in mind in terms of how to open, but like we said, going over budget with all the reshoots and everything, they probably just kind of put this together just as a quick way to let us in.
Mm-hmm.
My first thing I wrote down was why does Doc own that many clocks? That's never followed
experiment.
up on. Apparently.
Yeah.
So this was all done, I think, in the studio, or I guess in the Universal backlot.
Yeah, that's one of the unique things about this film is that everything was done in the Universal backlot. They didn't have any anything
too many locations.
Yeah. One until the third one that they actually had a location. The one of the original storyboards had Marty escaping Biff and the guys by skating over the train tracks.
Oh, nice.
And so they didn't shoot it because of budgetary reasons. But
is that for this movie or for part 3?
It was for this movie.
Okay. That's interesting.
And then they used that same location, so they had it scouted out for the third one.
Yeah, by the time they got to that.
Yeah.
Like you said, this definitely is a good way of sort of establishing who Doc is without us even seeing him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because it pans over to some newspaper clippings talking about how Doc Brown's family's mansion was destroyed somehow, and their estate was sold to a developer, which, his family history isn't really elaborated on, but you can kind of assume that he kind of came from a wealthy family.
Yeah.
It isn't really elaborated on, but it does kind of help inform who the character is. I think.
Yeah, it must be visual. It's mostly visual stuff that you can get an idea for, but you can't, but you don't know for sure. So I think that's one of the things that makes a movie great is that
it's an interesting character note.
Yeah, it gives backstory without actually giving you backstory.
Right. Same thing with the pictures of Ben Franklin and Thomas Edison. Just obviously, he's an inventor. He looks up to those guys.
Mm-hmm.
The radio ad there was a radio ad in the background for Statler Toyota. While all these machines, it's very Rube Goldberg-esque in terms of how they turn on the coffee machine, the TV.
Right.
Now, Rube Goldberg, for those, that refers to any of these machines that do very simple tasks that will look like very complicated machines with various moving parts just to do simple things. Think of like the board game Mousetrap, for example.
Right. Or would a Rube Goldberg, would that be like, you ever been to a science museum and they have like a marble that never touches the ground because like there's always something perfectly placed for it to bounce off of and then hit
Kind
something.
of.
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, but I think like I think the way Rube Goldberg would always design, I think he was a cartoonist. I'm not sure 100%, but I think he designed. But like the point was like these complex machines with moving parts just doing simple things like making ice or something.
Yeah.
Or like sharpening a pencil. You know.
Right.
Yeah. They mentioned the Toyota thing a lot, the Statler Toyota, which is like the car dealership. I wonder if Toyota must have been a sponsor.
They had to have been.
Yeah, because there's a lot of mention of Toyota, in the background for product placement. So this is all like automated as part of an alarm, and then the TV turns on as well, just sort of like just automatically, and you see the local newscast as the anchor lady, she reports on the recent plutonium theft, which is all great foreshadowing.
Yeah,
the camera
and they show the plutonium under the bed.
They do. The camera pans over to the toaster and the dog automatic dog food feeder. Now, clearly, no one has been home for several days.
Right.
And, Doc forgot to turn everything off. Classic, he's a classic absent-minded professor, archetype.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, this is all just more character building, just telling you what Doc's all about.
Yep.
So, finally, we're introduced to Marty as he walks in to check in on, Doc's garage/lab. Oh, I wrote down here, I think this scene was shot in the lab because they didn't have time to rebuild the set that would have taken place at Marty's school during the present day, during 1985.
Right.
They shot all the 1955 stuff there at the school,
but
they didn't have time to rebuild the set, because maybe they shot some stuff with Eric Stoltz at that, but they just didn't go through with it. So Marty is, they cut to a shot with Marty messing around with a giant speaker, a giant amp, and the world's tiniest guitar.
Yeah.
I wrote.
A little travel guitar.
Which it kind of comes out of left field if you think about it, but I think that was just a last-minute addition they made to convey that Marty loves skateboarding and rock and roll.
Yep.
It really has nothing to do with anything else in the plot, just establishing that this kid plays guitar.
Yep.
Which they kind of already did later in the movie, but they decided to put it in anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The gleaming pick shot was a nice touch, I thought.
Yeah.
And now this might seem a little random, but I'm pretty sure that this must have inspired the Michael Jackson black or white video that came out years later.
Could have, yeah.
They kind of repeat that gag with,
Yeah, they do. I think it also like establishes Marty as kind of a go for it. First, because he like turns everything up all the way, and everything's off the charts. So he's he's not a dumb kid, but he's also
he's impulsive.
He's a 17-year-old. So
he's impulsive. He loves to skateboard, loves to play, and they don't establish him. He's not a bad kid at all.
Yeah.
We'll get it. Yeah, I mean, but I don't even think he's a slacker because maybe he's not academically inclined, but I don't know. I mean, Marty McFly is just such a great character for many reasons. He's cool, but he's also relatable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's not a typical long hair 80s rocker guy, even though he is definitely a rocker, but and he's cool, but he's not flawless either. He's not the most popular kid in school. He has that everyman quality to him that I think really a lot of people relate to him. And it's just Michael J. Fox. He's just so incredibly charming.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Michael J. Fox was probably 24, 25 at this point, but he looks young enough, he could have played. He looks like he was a teenager back then. So he's one of those guys where he just always looked younger than he was. So he played roles that were younger than he really was.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I wrote down once he plays the chord and the amp explodes and knocks him back, I was just how Marty isn't deaf or concussed or had his neck broken is a miracle. He should be dead by then.
Movie magic.
Yeah.
For that one, I'm sure if
he's catapulted back.
Right.
And I think they threw in those aviator shades he was wearing. I guess that was a product placement thing.
Yeah.
But we don't see those for the rest of the movie.
Right. It's one of the only things that's like that doesn't pay off really. It really just it's its own setup and payoff. That's what the movie is really all about. Is like everything, like they set everything up pretty early and then pay it off later.
Yeah. I mean, the pacing on the movie is pretty well done.
Mm-hmm.
So after that all happens, then the phone rings, and Marty answers it, and it's Doc. Apparently, Doc has been away for an entire week. They don't say specifically where he was, but obviously it has something to do with working on the time machine and stealing plutonium. And and obviously we see in that one shot of Marty's skateboard hitting the plutonium underneath the couch or the bed or wherever that was. So I guess he asked Marty to check on the lab at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, why would Marty be there?
Right. Well, to play with the amplifier.
Right. And that's another thing. Like, the movie doesn't... And I think it's only the comics that really address this whole thing. But, like, we never really understand, like, what's the history of Doc and Marty? Like...
Yeah, they don't go into it in the movies. It's just in the comic book that... there's a comic that details exactly how Marty and Doc met and what the nature of their relationship is originally. Yeah,
and I know Gail...
Worth reading.
Definitely. Well, don't spoil it here for us, because I want to go and read it. But it's, Gail and Zemeckis had a couple theories about that. Like, why would this 17-year-old kid be hanging out with this scientist who's in his 60s by this point?
Yeah.
And it's like he's like kind of Doc's assistant, but not really, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if they were neighbors, or, I mean, it seems like they lived relatively close to each other, but like...
fairly close.
Yeah, but I guess one of Gail's theories was that, like, Doc used to, like, buy beer for Marty and his friends.
Right.
But, like, I don't know. That seems a little sleazy, a little weird. Like,
there's not a comic book that details that I've seen. So.
Yeah, that would be a little weird way to establish their relationship. But obviously they're really good friends, and Marty is sort of his assistant. But once the alarm clock goes off, he realizes he's late for school.
Yep.
He rushes out, and we hear The Power of Love for the first time. So I wrote this down. Apparently, Doc's house is fenced off and empties right into a Burger King parking lot.
Yeah.
So, but like, which I thought, like, man, that's such a weird place to like have your house.
I get it. That to have a house.
Say what?
That'd be a great place to have a house. The only thing I'd change about my house right here is if it like lived above the McDonald's across the street.
Yeah. If you want to have a heart attack by the time you're 35.
Yeah. In a month.
But apparently, according to Bob Gale and the producer Neil Canton, Doc's house was basically a flat set piece they put up to resemble a shed, just so they could incorporate Burger King into that shot, because product placement.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a tie-in with BK. I'm sure they were a big sponsor. And I saw that there was a Toys R Us sign in the background as well.
Hey, product placement is better than ads.
Yeah, for sure.
All the product placement you wanted, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
As long as I can not see the ads. I'm happy to see Google and Facebook and Twitch and.
There are some movies where they take the product placement a little too far, but we won't get into that. Talking to you, Power Rangers 2017. So, Marty is always grabbing onto moving cars and moving pickup trucks while skateboarding, which is insane.
Right.
Like, that is absolutely crazy. And apparently he rode this all the way to the center of town.
Yeah.
Supposedly when they put the movie out in Australia, Michael J. Fox had to record like a PSA warning kids not to do this.
Yeah.
Which, you should absolutely warn kids not to do that, because that's...
Yeah, Disney's Magical Express expressly forbid me from hanging on to the bus with roller skates.
Yeah, as they should. So, but apparently, he's late for school. Yeah, so he grabs onto the back of the pickup truck and hangs onto it while skating into town. Apparently, they take a detour through the center of town. This is just so we can see the changes, 1985 versus 1955. And I gotta say, the town does not look so great in 1985.
Nope.
A lot of pawn shops, a lot of bail bonds stores, a lot of adult bookstores. There's a porno theater.
Yep.
It is kind of funny to see
Where Steel Dragon where Steel Dragon practices.
Right. Wow, we're connecting that universe.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to see Marty wave to the aerobics class, which it was the same location as Lou's Cafe.
Yeah.
I also assume Texaco must have been a big sponsor as well, because they feature prominently in all the movies. Well, at least the first two, I mean.
First two for sure.
So of course we saw the Mayor Goldie Wilson poster as well in the ads. That's some foreshadowing for later. So by the time Marty gets to Hill Valley High School, I mean this place has so much graffiti on it. Clearly there are a lot of gangs in this town.
Right.
So, like I said before, Marty doesn't seem like a rebellious kid, but apparently he has a problem with getting to school on time.
On time, yeah. I see him as rebellious-ish. Like he's kind of a typical musician. You and I know. You and I have probably had our times when our parents screamed at us like, "Keep it down."
Right.
So he's probably something like that, and also like he's trying to be a little less like his dad.
Right. So
how meek he can be.
So he skates up to school, but we see his girlfriend, Jennifer Parker, who tries to help him without getting caught by Mr. Strickland, the principal.
Yep.
Now, apparently, he's been late to school 4 days in a row.
Yeah.
And I wrote down, maybe if someone gave him a ride to school instead of having him use his skateboard, he wouldn't have this issue.
Right.
Come on, Mom and Dad. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So.
Well, those Top Gun generals, they're gonna.
Yes. Yes, the great James Tolkien.
Yes.
Tolkien.
He should be Lex Luthor.
Right? He would have made a great Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys, like, he was such a great authority figure in so many 80s movies. I loved him in Masters of the Universe as well.
Nice.
So inside, the two of them get busted by Mr. Strickland, who overhears Marty talking about Doc. Mm-hmm. Now, again, I'm not sure why the principal of the school is monitoring the halls for late students. That's usually not what a principal does.
Right.
But like, he really gets in Marty's face, like hearing about like Doc Brown's like what are you doing hanging around with him for? Before he starts insulting his father.
Right.
Like, Mr. Strickland insults, Marty's dad, his band, and his whole family in one fell swoop. It's pretty amazing. It's like, man, this dude goes really hard. Like,
he's efficient. He's an efficient one.
But it's just like, man, he was like so pissed off at him. It was just like unnaturally like, man, like what a hard ass this guy is.
Mm-hmm. I love the line like, no McFly has ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley, and like, well, history is going to change. Great.
That's such a mean thing to say to a child.
Yeah. It shows a little bit of Marty's like, a little bit of bravery that he has that doesn't have.
He's definitely courageous.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, at the school dance auditions, we see one of the judges played by Huey Lewis. Which, like, that's such a thing of like a bygone era where it's like you'd have like a live band play a school dance. Like, you just don't, like, when we were growing up, that wasn't really a thing. And no,
I never had a band. I tried to get my band to play the school dance, but never could make it happen.
That would be such a thing, because it's like you would have to play specific stuff, because like, what do you dance to? At that point, unless you have this particular playlist. Mm-hmm. But like, I mean, I was born in '84. You were born a little bit after that, so it's like growing up in the '90s, that wasn't really a thing by that point.
Yeah.
But like I said, Marty is unique in that, like, he looks like a pretty normal guy. Like, he doesn't have the stereotypical glam rock or new wave fashions of the day. He reminds me a little bit of Rivers Cuomo from Weezer, where he's just kind of a normal, unassuming guy, but he can really play. And so we see his band, the Pinheads, and the guy who's playing bass in the Pinheads is actually
the guitar teacher.
Yeah, it was a guy named Paul Hansen, and he was the guy who taught Michael J. Fox how to play. Michael J. Fox could play a little bit already, but it was Paul Hansen who recorded actually the guitar parts, and this dude can really shred. I mean, so Marty is clearly a shredder, and it's like a heavier version of The Power of Love, which is an interesting choice, but Yeah, I'm sure that must have been Huey's idea because like Huey
Hmm.
cut them. Huey Lewis playing one of the teachers cuts them
Snuffy.
off
Yeah.
and says that they're just too loud. And
Yeah.
supposedly that was Huey's idea. He wanted to put
Yeah.
that
That's
line
all.
in,
That's all.
which is pretty great.
Yeah.
But Marty is obviously just devastated, that
Hmm.
that he doesn't get the gig. So later on, we cut to Marty and Jennifer walking through the town square, and while we see a bunch more Goldie Wilson campaign signs and ads,
Mm.
and Marty is just really frustrated yet because he hasn't gotten the chance to play in front of anyone, which I can understand. Like when
Yeah.
you're a kid in high school, it's hard to get booked.
Yeah.
It's hard to find places to play. So it's like, when I was saying, when I was in high school, I had a really hard time getting a band together, let alone being able
Yeah.
to get gigs on my own. So I can definitely relate to that, and I'm sure you
Yeah.
can as well, Gabe.
Oh yeah, easily.
So
And
and it's also a
and the
great character.
whole fear of rejection that he goes through
Yes,
next when he's like, okay, what if I send in the tape and they don't like it? What if they tell me to hit the road? What if they say, get out of here, kid? You got no future. I mean, I'm just not sure I can take that kind of a rejection.
exactly. It's a great character note.
Yep.
You see that part of his father's personality that he takes after, that fear of rejection and low self-esteem,
Hmm.
which makes him hesitant to send his demo tape into a record company.
Hmm.
I also love the bit with him like checking out the chicks from the aerobic class. I thought that was funny. Well,
Yeah.
like visibly, it's like, come on, man, that's a rookie mistake.
Right.
You don't do that in front of your lady. Or at
The
least
lady's she's very understanding.
she's very forgiving of it.
Yeah.
But
And he loves her too. Like it's
clearly, yeah.
it's a classic look but don't touch kind of thing.
Yeah.
That some guys seem to have a problem with.
Yeah, I mean,
Unfortunately.
I do too. I just don't telegraph it like that. That's
Right.
that's my secret. Yeah. So while all this is going on, we see Marty check out his dream car. That's on a trailer that's being
Yep.
being driven across. It's a Toyota, this black Toyota 4x4 pickup truck.
Yep.
Which again, that leads credence to my theory that Toyota must have been a sponsor for this movie.
Yeah.
But so I know they're planning on Marty was planning on taking Jennifer to the lake for a camping trip, but he doesn't want to tell his parents that he's taking Jennifer.
Mhm.
Yeah, he just said, it's like, are you kidding? I told my parents that I'm going camping with the guys.
Yeah, 'cause his mom must have been born a nun.
Right. He says this because Marty says that his mother told him that she never did those sort of things when she was his age. Tons of foreshadowing there.
Yep.
So meanwhile, they're about to kiss, but they get interrupted by this lady who's asking for donations to save the clock tower, and she's basically there to provide a ton of exposition, which is great.
Done.
It's another great way to introduce the narrative thread without like really playing it in your face.
Mm-hmm.
So, and especially as she hands the flyer with the copy of the the newspaper article, as Jen writes down her phone number because she says she's going to be at her grandmother's.
Grandma's, yeah.
Yeah. Again, great.
As of all the, thank goodness he kept that on him.
Yes.
Too, there's so many things that had to go right, and life is like that. It's you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but not really that much because
thankfully Marty doesn't throw away that flyer, and he had a reason to because Jen would put her grandmother's phone number on it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. This is before cell phones, kids.
Yep.
And meanwhile Jennifer's dad pulls up in that great wood paneling station wagon that you saw so many times in 80s movies.
Yeah, my dad had growing up we had a station wagon.
With the wood paneling on it?
I think it might have had that. I don't remember exactly, but
it looks a lot like Clark Griswold's car from the first Vacation movie.
Right.
While Jen leaves, Marty skates back home while hanging onto the back of a cop car. That's even crazier than what he was doing before. But
I gotta think he has a relationship with the cops, and that the guy was like, hang on the back.
Yeah, go ahead, it's fine.
Whatever. And then we see the graffiti on the Lion Estates too.
Yes, we do see that. So by the time Marty gets back home to his neighborhood, Lion Estates, as Power of Love is still playing in the background again. It's definitely a stunt double skating off the truck, because there's no way they'd let Michael J. Fox do that.
Yeah.
But supposedly this is like one of the few movies, like mainstream movies, that really featured skateboarding.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it, I can't think of too many that were around before then.
I can't think of very many at all.
Yeah.
That features skateboarding much at all. Like, the only one that comes to mind is Parental Guidance, which is a relatively recent one with like Billy Crystal and Marissa Tomei. Not a particularly good one, but not terrible.
Was that out in the 80s?
No, this was like.
That's the one where he's playing Marissa Tomei's dad, and he and Bette Midler are grandparents or something. Yes. I remember hearing about that. Yeah. Oh, so that's much later, but
but it's the only other skateboarding movie I can think of.
Oh wow, okay, yeah. I mean, it's fun. I wasn't really a skater growing up, but like I wanted to have a skateboard because Marty McFly had one.
Yeah, I wanted a skateboard because I played Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
There you go. So Marty finally arrives home, and it must have taken him a while to get home because it's almost nighttime by this point. So Marty arrives home, and he's horrified to see his dad's car completely wrecked, and it's being towed away. It's being towed onto his driveway. Mm-hmm. So Marty walks into the front door of his house, and he sees Biff Tannen admonishing his father, George McFly, for loaning Biff his car without telling him about a blind spot.
Right.
Now, they never say why Biff needed George's car in the first place, but again, this is just great character building because they're establishing who these guys are. Definitely. And Biff is such a great antagonist. Like, there's absolutely zero redeeming qualities about him when we meet him.
Exactly.
He's just a terrible person.
Yep.
So Biff refuses to have his insurance cover the damage and shamelessly admits to drinking while driving.
Right.
Like, I spilled beer all over my shirt. You gonna pay for my drink? Yeah, like it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not sure exactly what Biff and George do for a living, but clearly they work together, and somehow Biff is George's supervisor.
Mm.
Not sure how that happened, but
probably stole other people's work.
Of course, that's his thing. So, but like George kind of pretends to laugh off Biff's, anything Biff says and does, and it's like, even when he grabs him and says, "Hello, come on, anybody home?" And George is like, "Oh, that's Biff. He's just kidding around."
Yeah.
Even though he's just dying inside,
right.
You could tell.
Yeah, and here's like after he says, say hello to your mom for me, and
he insults
the beer.
He insults Marty to his face, calls him a butthead in his house, right in front of his dad, and makes a suggestive comment about his mother, George's wife, like right to their face, and walks out. And it's just, oh man, like George, he's just the most pathetic dude.
And have you seen the deleted scene? That's
yes.
Yeah, like someone else comes in and says, "Hey, I put you down for a case of peanut brittle, so go get it." And so that explains why he's eating peanut brittle for dinner.
I was going to get to that with the whole peanut brittle gag and where that came from.
Yeah.
But it happened so quick that like it didn't really throw off anything.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
But yeah, like George, this guy is just completely spineless, and he knows that he is. And clearly Marty has had this conversation with his dad before, but George is just too afraid to stand up to Biff because Biff is his supervisor, and he just doesn't have it in him.
Right. Although
Marty seems a little bit more concerned about not being able to borrow his dad's car for the weekend.
Yep.
So later on, as the McFly family sits down, yes, George pours himself just a ridiculously full bowl of peanut brittle, a reference to that deleted scene where one of his neighbors has a daughter who's in the Girl Scouts, and he just like he puts George down for a case and just like. Yeah. And George agrees to it. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll take it. And he said, "See, I told you we'd only have to stop at one house."
Hey, he doesn't even thank him or anything like that. So like,
yeah. So that just goes. So George is a complete pushover. We established that. So I always notice Marty is drinking a Diet Pepsi, and later on he asks for a soda without sugar in it. So it makes me wonder, like, is Marty diabetic?
Yep.
Like,
I think Michael J. Fox was diabetic at the time.
Okay, I guess I wonder if that's why they put that in there.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's a very specific thing. You don't really see that too much from most kids that age.
Right.
you know.
Sure.
So I guess they must have put that in there, you know, for Michael. So, and meanwhile, we see Marty's older brother, Dave, played by Mark McClure, Jimmy Olsen from the Superman movies.
Oh, no way. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. From the ones with Christopher Reeve.
Right.
I guess Mark McClure and Wendy Jo Sperber, who played Linda, Marty's sister, they had worked with the Bobs before in used cars and other movies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they got cast. Marty's older brother, Dave, is there at the table in his Burger King work outfit, and their sister, Linda, is. Now, both of them, I think they've both graduated high school by this point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're both living at home or why they're there. It's kind of implied that they both live at home as well.
Yeah, they do.
But either way, George and Dave are just having a great time watching a rerun of The Honeymooners.
That's it. That's what they're.
I'm not sure if either Dave or Linda are in college at this point. They're definitely graduated from high school, but
yeah.
So then we see Lorraine. Lorraine walks in, and you know she's chain smoking, you know, drinking. You know, she's just not in good shape. She walks in with a cake that she had baked for their Uncle Joey.
Yeah.
For his release from jail, and apparently he didn't make parole this time. It's never actually said what Uncle Joey was in jail for.
There's a comic book about it.
Ah, okay. Well, I will definitely check that out.
Yes.
So Dave then rushes out to catch the bus for work. George's laugh is hilarious. Just yeah, just I don't know if that was something Crispin Glover made up on the spot, but it was just like his facial expressions during that is just it's very funny to me for some reason.
Like peak dork.
Yes. Yeah, he's just the nerdiest dude you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so Linda tells Marty that Jennifer has called him twice already, and Lorraine clearly disapproves. She says that girls should not be calling boys or chasing boys because she never did that when she was that age. And you know, it's a very old school mindset to it.
Yep.
But then Linda's like, "Well, Mom, how am I supposed to meet anybody?"
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, Lorraine says, "Oh, it'll just happen, just like the way I met your father." And then this is a great way to establish their history, and Lorraine reminds Linda about how she and George met. All this great foreshadowing about how he was hit by the car, and then love how George pretends not to hear when Lorraine asks him what he was doing in the middle of the street.
Yep.
More foreshadowing. So
yep.
Lorraine is like pouring herself some more vodka into her iced tea as she continues with her story, and you get the feeling that she does genuinely love her husband, but she just seems just so sad and disappointed about how their lives had turned out.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, you get that feeling of regret. Like, I don't think she's I don't think she's not in love with George. I think she's just she just doesn't really respect him all that much.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously it's
kind of like a lot of people around town.
Yeah, it's just, you know, and she's just not happy with how their lives have turned out, and clearly that must have taken a toll in their marriage.
Right.
But, you know, but clearly it's not the most functional family unit. But Marty seems to be the most normal one out of the bunch somehow. So later that night, at around exactly 12:28 a.m., in his fully lit room, Marty is passed out on bed.
Yep. Even
though all the lights are on.
Yeah.
Which seems unlikely for a teenager on a Friday night to fall asleep that early.
Mm. Well, it's 1 a.m. when we get back together with him.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's exactly 12:28 a.m.
Oh, right.
Where Marty is like passed out in his clothes, face down, in bed when the phone rings. Now, unless Marty had his own phone line, he's very lucky that he answered it before anyone in the house woke up.
Yeah.
Because for you younger kids listening, that's the way landlines were back in the day. Yeah. So apparently Marty was trying to stay awake, but he fell asleep. You know.
Yeah.
And Doc was calling to Marty and just saying, "Hey, could you stop by the house on the way to the mall and pick up the video camera?" He said, "Meet me at Twin Pines Mall, 1:15 a.m. in the parking lot." You know, Marty eventually skates. Yeah, he skates over to the Twin Pines Mall. I don't know how far away from his neighborhood it must have been.
I think it's 5 miles because it shows it in when he parks the DeLorean behind in 1955.
Right.
about like 5 miles or so.
Something
Maybe
like that. But it's
1.5 miles.
relatively close, but still quite a far distance to skate. But
interesting thing in the making of documentary, they talk about how the reason why the town square is so kind of dilapidated is because everyone's going out to the mall. And what used to be like in the town square, the restaurant,
that's right.
the shopping, all that.
Right, the businesses have moved away. That makes sense.
Yeah, and
that makes sense.
So.
Yeah, that's a good point. So at the Twin Pines Mall, Marty is skating into the parking lot and sees Doc's truck. It's like a big moving van, and for some reason, Doc Brown's dog Einstein is waiting outside.
Yep.
Just out there. I guess just keeping watch.
Yeah, keeping watch. Well trained.
So Marty skates up to him and says Einstein. He's like, hey, where's the Doc? So then the ramp on the back of the truck dramatically opens as the DeLorean backs out amidst like a cloud of fog and dry ice. Like, I'm sure, was Doc just waiting in there, just waiting for Marty to show up to make a dramatic entrance?
I don't think so. I think he was just happened to be there, and it came right out. Like, and Marty just like happened to get there right on time. I mean, it does happen sometimes.
It just seems like it's so like the way that's set up. Like why is he waiting there just to make a dramatic entrance?
Right.
But the DeLorean backs out amidst a cloud of fog or dry ice or whatever he's using, complete with the out of time vanity plate.
Yeah.
So as the car door opens, there's more fog in the car as we see Doc make his entrance. And I was like, was that supposed to be a weed joke in there?
Right.
Are they trying to suggest that Doc's a stoner? Because I'm not getting that vibe at all. He's way too high strung for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, just Christopher Lloyd. I mean, he was just pitch perfect for this.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I can't imagine anyone else having done this role justice. Oh. He's so physical with like his facial expressions and body language, everything. And Fox is the same way too. He's a very physical performer as well. Just
I think
both their deliveries are perfect.
Stoltz is that he just didn't have the physicality that Michael J. Fox had.
Yeah, and maybe the chemistry wasn't there. Who
exactly.
knows? I mean, just the chemistry between those two was great. Right. They played off each other so well. So we meet Doc Brown. He's out there in a full radiation suit, and he tells Marty to start filming immediately. He says, "I'll answer any questions. Just roll the camera right now. Let's get started." So Doc then puts Einstein in the driver's seat and makes a note that they both have synchronized digital watches that they both have. Einstein has one right around his collar.
Yeah, perfectly synced.
Sure, yeah, perfectly synced. Yep. And he straps Einstein in to, buckles him up. And then Doc proceeds to use a remote control to drive the car while Einstein is in the driver's seat.
Yep.
The driver's seat. Now, look, that alone is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Like, we're almost 40 years removed from this movie. I don't know if we have remote control cars like this now.
We have some self-driving cars, but like we're still working out the kinks for it.
I mean, it's not available to the public, obviously, but like I don't even know if that technology exists now. But like,
it didn't then because it's actually a guy in a dog suit driving the car.
Right. Yeah. Which I heard was kind of a reference to like Herbie the Love Bug, the Shaggy Dog.
Right.
That was a reference to that old Disney movie. So yeah, I'm sure they must have obviously had a stunt guy in there driving it. But like when you think about it, like putting the time machine away for a second, like that's pretty impressive to have a functioning remote control for your car. Like you could stop right there and that would be cool. He probably could have made a lot of money from that.
Yeah.
So Doc moves both himself and Marty directly into the car's path as the car takes off at 88 miles an hour towards them before disappearing, leaving. And again, it does the time jump. It leaves the twin flaming tire tracks.
Yep.
Which how it doesn't burn them both in the crotch is amazing.
Yeah. Or set their clothes on fire.
That too. So, but I mean, it looks great.
Yeah.
So Doc is celebrating. He's like, "Oh my gosh, it worked! It worked!" And Marty is horrified.
Yeah.
He thinks Doc has disintegrated.
Einstein.
He thinks that Doc has murdered his dog.
Right.
and like destroy the car.
Mm.
And Doc explains, it's like, no, I invented a time machine. Like, Einstein is going to come back in exactly, so-and-so seconds. And it's just an iconic scene. Marty's delivery is just pitch perfect. The tone of voice, everything. And so
level of horror.
Yeah.
And confusion. Where the hell are they?
And it's done comically so, but like, yeah.
No, there's a test screening. The reason why the movie was released on the July 4th weekend was because the test screening was so positive.
Oh, yeah?
Like, they had never had a test screening that positive before.
Oh, that's cool.
And so, but like, during that part of the test screening, like, people did a big sigh of relief when the time machine came back up.
Right. I can see that.
Yeah.
So so after 1 minute, the time machine does reappear, and the surface of the car is frozen, which is much to Doc's surprise. Like, they expected it to be hot, but it's very cold. It's kind of a funny gag.
Yeah.
They don't really go back to it very often throughout the sequels.
Yeah, they don't. It seems like they do it once in the
in this movie they do, but really in 2 and 3 they don't really deal with that. I think just because it was too much of a pain in the butt for them to film. Honestly.
Yeah, and also they did do it in 2, like when they go back to 1955, when he lands the DeLorean. It's
okay.
Yeah, like it seems like the hover conversion or whatever must have helped with that. Or you could think of it like the rain and the fog in the sky.
Sure. Sure. But anyways, while Doc is explaining to Marty how the time machine works, he explains the significance of November 5th, 1955, as the day he had first conceived the idea of time travel, specifically the flux capacitor, after sustaining a head injury, and how it took nearly 30 years and his entire family fortune to make it happen. So later on, when Marty asks if the car runs on regular gas, Doc says no, and he mentions that it requires something with a little more kick, plutonium. Now, this was sort of retconned in Part 3, where it was specified that the flux capacitor and time circuits needed something extra to generate, the energy necessary for time travel, but the car's engine still ran on ordinary gasoline.
Yeah. Yeah, the car's engine runs on gasoline. The time travel and the circuits, the flux capacitor needed a nuclear reaction. He was able to get that retrofitted with the Mr. Fusion from the future.
Right. So that's like kind of a continuity error in it, but not really,
Yeah.
So it happens so fast, like, you don't really even think about it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, obviously the car still needed to drive in 1955, even though they didn't have plutonium. So you could put 2 and 2 together there. So Doc actually admits to that he obtained this plutonium from a group of Libyan nationalists in exchange for building them a fake bomb.
Yep.
Now that's disturbing on quite a few levels.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the Libyan stuff, that was very topical at the time with Muammar Gaddafi and all that stuff. So that was sort of a commentary on that. But like, I'm wondering, how does Doc have access to the black market, and what else has he been doing that we don't know about?
Right. Well,
it's like,
he has a truck, I think, if I remember correctly, somewhere like Doc Brown's science services. Like anything you have a problem with, if it's science based, which is just about everything that we work with, like he's offering his services to help them, and so
which I always thought was kind of funny, like seeing that on the side of his vans, like scientific services 24 hours a day.
Yeah. He's basically he's an advanced.
Who calls up a scientist?
Yeah.
Like, what scientific needs do you need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? You know what I mean? Like, that's such a crazy business model in 1985.
Yeah. Hey, your TV's broken. They get a scientist to.
I mean, I guess he's got to pay the bill somehow, I guess.
Yep.
Especially since he doesn't have his family fortune anymore. But like, I just thought that was funny. Like, how does Doc know Libyan national? Like, who's he hanging out with?
Mm-hmm.
But later on, Doc and Marty put on their hazmat suits, the radiation suits, and they insert the plutonium into the lead-lined chamber in the rear of the vehicle.
Yeah.
So Doc then puts his suitcase under the hood of the car. So I guess the engine itself might be in the back.
Yeah, there are some cars that did work that way.
Yeah, sure.
And
Why
I think
not?
the DeLorean was one of them.
So Doc's original plan is to travel 25 years into the future.
2010.
Yeah, 2010. So I was doing the math. Like I wanted to
Right.
say 2000, but I'm like, yeah, that would be 2010.
Yeah.
So, and he's about to get more plutonium for the return trip before he panics at the sight of the Libyans approaching in the VW van that's approaching. Classic Volkswagen hippie van, you know.
Yep.
So the Libyans immediately open fire as Marty and Doc attempt to take cover. Now, Doc attempts to draw their fire and shoot back with like an old pistol, like
Yeah.
maybe Colt 45, but
Yeah.
it's old. It doesn't fire. The van finally catches up to Doc, and Doc attempts to surrender by throwing down his gun,
Yep.
but the gunmen just brutally open fire,
Yeah.
apparently killing Doc instantly.
Yep.
Now, I think it's possible that Doc may have actually worn a bulletproof vest in this timeline.
Mhm.
It's never indicated. It's implied that he didn't,
Mhm.
but like we don't see any blood or anything, so it's
Right.
not like. So it's a question that's never really answered by the movie. But like I
Yeah.
have a theory that like, all right, if he's prepared for the possibility that this might happen, he has a gun with him.
Mhm.
Chances are he might have taken precautions regardless. But
Yeah.
Marty doesn't know that. For all he knows, like Doc is dead.
Yeah.
So Marty is watching in horror, and he's almost killed too. But their machine gun is out of bullets or it malfunctions. It gives Marty just enough time to hop in the DeLorean and make a break for it.
Yeah. It jams. That's the word.
Yeah. So which makes sense. Look, he's not gonna jump into Doc's truck and try to outrun these
Right.
guys. The DeLorean's gonna be much faster.
Yeah.
And while all this is going on, like I'm wondering, were there parking lot security cameras or guards in 1985? Because there is no
so.
way that there's no way that this could have happened today
No.
without the police immediately being on the scene or someone calling them. Like, I mean, surely there had to be cameras like that in 1985. I would think.
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, anyone who's listening who's a little bit older than us would have to verify that. But
Right.
you know, I'm pretty sure they were around
Good
back then.
question.
Or someone would have heard it or something. But
Yeah. I mean, like 1 a.m. At a mall, like, you know, those places are completely ghost towns at 1 o'clock in the morning.
But I agree, but like you
Typically.
still like I mean, unless people are there for a movie theater or getting out late,
Yeah.
you know. What was I saying? Yeah, it also reminds me a little bit of the mall car chase from the Blues Brothers.
Mm.
I kind of want someone to take this footage and recut it with Can't Turn You Loose in the background.
Nice.
You know what I'm talking about?
I haven't seen Blues Brothers.
Okay, I'll send you the piece of music I'm talking about. And
Awesome.
anyone else who's seen the Blues Brothers and listening, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Right.
That would make for a very funny video. But during this chase through the empty parking lot, Marty inadvertently he bumps his elbow into the switch that turns the time circuits on. Like
Yep.
he was not looking to time travel or anything.
No.
They specifically wanted this to be like an accident, him
Yeah.
going back by accident. So as the gunman is pulling out a bazooka, Marty is just flooring it, trying to outrun them. And at this point, he reaches 88 miles per hour and
Yep.
inadvertently, accidentally jumps back to November 5th, 1955.
Yeah.
Now, as Doc alluded to earlier, Twin Pines Mall used to be the Twin Pines Ranch.
Yeah.
And Marty is startled and distracted as he crashes into a scarecrow before he crashes into the barn. Now, while all this is happening, it's early in the morning on November 5th,
Yeah.
1955, and the Peabody family, they emerge from their farmhouse after hearing the crash. They're completely panicked about what is going on, like something
Yep.
crashed into our barn. As they open the barn door, they can see the DeLorean, and understandably are like completely bewildered at what's going on here. Like what is this thing? What are they seeing? They have no idea what to make out of it. And the son, the boy,
Has a
pulls
comic.
out a comic book that he, for some reason, happened to be carrying with him as they woke up. Like why he would be carrying that with him, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I probably got up while he was reading it, closed it, and then just didn't let go of it.
Right, because they all woke up at this
Yeah.
point, like it's the middle of the night or early in the morning, and it's a comic book called Tales from Space,
Hmm.
and saying that, oh my gosh, this has to be a UFO.
Right.
And so Marty, in full hazmat suit with the hood down, he stumbles out, and
Yep.
the family is freaking out, thinking he's an alien or something, not knowing what's going on. Marty's trying to apologize, but the old man Peabody, he opens fire with his shotgun immediately.
Yep.
While the son suggests, oh, the alien must have already mutated into human form.
Shoot it.
So thankfully, Marty gets away, although he runs over one of the twin pines.
Yep.
So in the process.
Yep.
And like he's probably traumatizing and scarring this poor family for life.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how this affected their history and this new timeline,
Right.
but it's just like they're probably all just traumatized.
Right.
And just like, what the hell is going on here? They might have been locked up in an insane asylum from here on out. We don't know. But Marty is very lucky that the car wasn't shot or totaled at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So he finally drives away. Thankfully, as the sun rises, so everything's nice and well lit.
Right.
And he's like, okay, this has got to be a dream. He convinces himself he's been dreaming when he drives to the future site of Lyon Estates.
Yep.
In 1955, the development had not yet been built. Originally, in the script, they were going to have everything be under construction, but they just didn't have the budget to build a construction site. So they just had the billboard there saying, coming soon, Lyon Estates.
Right.
So, as he pulls over, Marty's attempting to ask, he's still in his full radiation suit. He's trying to ask a question to this older couple that's driving by, but the lady is just terrified of Marty, and they drive off. So Marty's starting to put two and two together, but he's not 100% sure.
Yep.
Because the plutonium reserves are depleted and the time circuits have lost power.
Right.
So he moves the car behind the billboard, tries to cover it up as best he can, and then walks all the way into town, which is about 2 miles away.
Yeah.
So as Mr. Sandman is playing in the background, which is the perfect song choice for the era, for the time.
And going with the theme of, like, this must be a dream.
Yes. So Marty's walking through the town square and just is astonished at how different everything is.
Mm-hmm.
And just Michael J. Fox's reactions to this are spot on.
Yep.
It's perfect. Like his facial expressions and body language, like it's not over the top, like he's not hamming it up, but it's enough to like genuinely convey amazement and confusion as to where he is.
Right.
I wrote down here, it's like I wasn't sure what that one toy was, where like the kid who looked like he had springs on in his shoes.
Spring-loaded shoe toys, which
yeah. And I was laughing about this because I was watching it with my mom one time, and my mom was actually born in 1955.
Nice.
And I was born in 1984. But she's like, yeah, man, back in the day, kids just make up like homemade toys all the time,
right,
to amuse ourselves. And it's like, all right, so. Like, I didn't know if that was like a common toy in 1955, but that's what this kid had. So Marty must have known by this point that he did time travel.
Yeah.
But like, but he wasn't totally sure because he saw like the functioning clock tower.
Yeah.
It wasn't until he picked up the newspaper and saw it that really confirmed it for him.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he's like, this has got to be a dream. I've got to still be dreaming. So Marty then walks into Lou's Cafe, which is the future site, of course, of the aerobic studio.
Yep.
He spots that they have a payphone in there, and as he walks in, Lou, the man behind the bar, he's like, "Hey, kid, what'd you just jump ship?"
What?
Which that was great because he was asking about the life preserver, which they go back to quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I wrote down, I don't know if that style of jacket he was wearing, if that was a particularly popular jacket during the early 80s. Because this is really the only like movie or show or anything where I've seen someone wear a jacket like that.
Yeah, I know.
With that red like material with the denim sleeves. Like jean jackets.
I think I had something similar when I was a kid, but...
like jean jackets were a thing back then. Denim jackets. Yeah, like that's such a specific like look associated with Marty McFly.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know of anyone else like really wearing that. So,
right.
But it's funny that they incorporate it and that they comment on it so much. But as Marty goes to the phone book, he looks up Doc's listing in the white pages, And there's a quick gag with Marty's digital watch beeping, and he's like hiding it from Lou as he walks by.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny.
It's a calculator watch, which I actually had a similar type of watch when I was in high school. I cheated on math tests with it.
I'll bet you did.
So, yeah, because it had the calculator, and they said no calculators. I was like, but that's pointless.
Yeah, it's not like they'll be on your phone. Oh wait.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, after he calls the number, he doesn't get an answer, so Marty rips the page out of the phone book, and he goes up to ask Lou about where Doc's address is. But Lou's like, "Kid, are you gonna order something or what?" Like Lou doesn't care.
Right.
like this is way before Yelp, so you know what I mean. So then they have the funny little back and forth where like with Marty's ordering a tab, then a Pepsi free, which I guess was that Diet Pepsi.
Yeah, that was it was a brand of Pepsi back in the 80s. It
must have been short-lived, like New Coke. Like it didn't last very long.
It was. There was. I feel like it was somewhere in one of the either establishing shots earlier in the movie. Mm-hmm. Like I remember there being a Pepsi free somewhere.
Probably in Marty's room.
He was drinking it with the Diet Pepsi. It might have actually been a Pepsi free.
Right.
But
then, like he talks about Tab and stuff like that, which Tab was like already kind of an old thing by the time 1985 was there. But like Zemeckis and Gale just thought the joke was too good. They got to keep it in.
Yep.
So again, it lends credence to the theory that Marty must have been diabetic because he wanted something with no sugar in it.
Yep.
So as Marty sits down, unbeknownst to him, he sits down next to his father, George, who's about 17 as well.
And in the same exact pose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when they turn around at the same time.
Yeah. Well, no,
so
when he puts his head down, it's exactly the same way that George is doing it.
It's perfect. So Marty looks over as Biff and his gang, who their names are Match, Skinhead, and 3D. I found as Biff and his gang enter the diner, and Marty is completely shocked to see Biff as a teenager before realizing that Biff is speaking to George, his father, as a teenager. Like he can't believe what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's a total like continuation because Biff is once again bullying George and making him do his homework for him.
Yeah.
And for some reason, he doesn't want George to be in Lou's diner. It's never explained why, but he's always saying, like, I don't want to see you in here again.
Yeah.
Don't know why, but like, that's a thing with him.
Yeah. No, a lot of bullies are like that. Like,
just a power play.
Exactly.
That's all it is. So Marty is just totally gobsmacked at this point to see the younger version of his father. George kind of laughs it off like he would do years later.
Yeah.
And as Biff and his guys leave, he's just like staring at George, and until George is like, what? Like, what are you staring at? Yeah.
And great scene, great performance from Chris.
And he's like, you're George McFly. He's like, yeah, who are you? So before Marty can say anything, he's interrupted by Goldie Wilson, the busboy, the future mayor of Hill Valley. He intervenes. He asks George why he lets those bullies push him around, and actually gives George some like really great like advice.
Yeah.
Like the actor who plays Goldie, a guy named Donald Fullilove, like he was really, I gotta give him credit. Like this guy's putting a lot of energy into a really small part.
Yeah.
Like I get like a lot of like stage actor vibes from this guy. Like he kind of plays it a little bit over the top, but like he definitely like it's such a quick like scene, but like you could tell he's definitely trying to
choose up the scenery. Yeah.
Yeah. He's such a good character. Mm-hmm. So while Marty's listening to this, and Marty blurts out,
he's going to be mayor.
Yeah, he blurts out he's going to be mayor, and then Goldie gets like, mayor, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure he would have gotten that idea anyway, obviously. Mm-hmm. But the back and forth between Goldie and George and Marty and Lou was just great. So while all this is going on, George kind of sneaks away and just rode away on his bike. Marty then chases after him. Now, and I wrote down, like, I'm not sure what Marty's motivation here is for chasing his father. I mean, besides just being naturally curious and wanting to get to know him, like, clearly he hasn't thought this through. Like,
oh, yeah.
Like, what was his mentality? Like, what was he going to do if he caught up with George?
Maybe ask him if he knew Doc Brown.
Yeah, gotcha.
where he was.
Otherwise, like blurt out, "I'm your son from the future." Like,
Right. I think it was just like it was partly like he just kind of wanted to hang out with him, see what he was like.
Yeah, he probably just wanted to ask him questions about what his life was like as a teenager.
Yeah.
But I wrote down like if he catches up to George, there's no good outcome out of any of this.
Like a dog chasing cars.
Right. like nothing good is going to come out of that interaction.
Mm-hmm.
But as Marty follows George, he spots George's bike parked next to a tree. So Marty looks up and he spots George, like perched on a tree branch, using binoculars to clearly spy on a girl changing in her bedroom.
Yep.
Now, I wasn't sure if this was supposed to be Lorraine or if it was supposed to be someone else. It's never really like shown. You can't really see the girl's
you can't see the
face. But obviously she's changing. She's in her bra and panties and all that. And Marty's disgusted. He's a peeping Tom. But once George loses his grip, he falls into the street and he's about to be hit by a car. But Marty instinctually rushes out to save his dad's life. He pushes George out of the way and he takes the hit, and thus he causes the major disruption in the timeline.
Yep.
Because the driver of the car is Sam Baines, the father of Lorraine and Marty's future grandfather.
Right.
And he yells out, "Stella, another one of these damn kids jumped in front of my car." And I'm thinking, like, how many kids has he hit with his car over the years?
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
Like what are we not? What else are we not learning about?
I know, right?
About Mr. Baines here. So we cut to a scene where Marty is laying in bed and he wakes up 9 hours later, probably severely concussed at this point.
Oh yeah, easily.
So he hears his mother's voice and he thinks he's back home and that it was all a bad dream, only to wake up and find himself being attended to by his mother Lorraine, who is also 17 at this time. Now, during this scene, I'm wondering, like, the first thing I'm wondering, like, okay, did Lorraine take his pants off?
I think so.
I'm like, now, think about how whacked out that is for a second.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't know that this is her son from the future. This is a complete stranger who's in her bed, and she removes his pants, and he clearly wants to jump him,
Yeah,
clearly has the hots for him. Like he's a complete stranger. Could you imagine if the genders were reversed in this scene?
Oh yeah.
Think about that. Think about how creepy that is.
Well,
I get that it's a different time, but still.
No, I think even in '55 it wouldn't have been okay for a guy to take off a sleeping girl's.
It would have been frowned upon.
Jeans, yeah.
I mean, they're both underage. They're both kids, but still, like it's not a great look.
Right.
So clearly, she was checking him out and assumed that his name was Calvin Klein.
Right.
Now, obviously, like it's played for comedic effect. It's unknowingly attracted to her future son due to the Florence Nightingale effect. It's like
creepy.
Putting the future son thing aside. Like, are we to assume that Lorraine has snuck in her room to undress a complete stranger without his consent in the hopes of seducing him?
Right.
I was writing down because holy shit, that would be creepy if the genders were reversed. But it's a funny scene.
Mm-hmm.
So we cut to when Lorraine's mother, Marty's future grandmother, Stella, leads Marty and Lorraine down the stairs, and she assumed that he's a sailor because of the jacket.
Yep.
Again, getting plenty of mileage out of the gag.
Yeah.
And Marty said Coast Guard for some reason. I didn't mean
to like cover.
I guess. Yeah, I was wondering, like, was that
because it's '80s clothes? It's not something that most people.
I guess that was his attempt to cover it, unless that was like a Coast Guard specific jacket. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But then Marty, the family's having dinner right there, and Marty meets his future aunt and uncles.
Right.
The gag with Baby Joey is pretty funny.
Yeah.
Like, better get used to this bars, kid. And Milton is played by a young Jason Hervey, who he would later go on to play Wayne in the Wonder Years.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and he's done a bunch of other stuff. He's a producer and TV executive now.
Nice.
But yeah, Stella is really nice enough to invite Marty to dinner as Sam wheels in the TV to watch The Honeymooners.
Yep.
So the back and forth about the TV, and it's like nobody has two television sets.
Yep.
It was pretty good, and especially the rerun. I felt like the John F. Kennedy bit was a little bit forced.
Mm-hmm.
Although, like, the actor playing Sam delivers the line perfectly. Who the hell is John F. Kennedy? Although it's like, you wouldn't expect everyone to know, like, who streets are named after. You know what I mean? So it's like, but it's a funny joke.
That's a good
regardless.
gag.
A little bit forced, but it's fine. Even with Lorraine just being so thirsty, like, man, she is all over him.
Thirst trap.
Stay in my room. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And like grabbing his leg.
It's like I gotta go.
That was that's the scene that introduced me to Back to the Future.
Yeah. So, but Sam's line about like, Lorraine, if you ever have a kid that acts like that, I'll disown you.
Right.
Which is funny, but that's also a weird line to say to your teenage daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I would expect him to say, like, Lorraine, you ever bring home a guy like that, I'll disown you.
Yeah. I think it's just kind of being facetious.
Yeah, for sure. So Marty makes his way to Doc's house, his family estate, and it's a very big house.
Mm-hmm. Doc is the Brown mansion.
Yes, it's the Brown estate. Now, Doc is supposed to be in his 30s here, I think.
35.
Yeah, around 35, but he looks pretty much the same as he did in 1985.
Mm.
Without some makeup and whatnot.
Yeah.
But just Christopher Lloyd, again, I write down, like, how great he is in this role and just how over the top he is. But, like, testing his mind reading machine on Marty was really funny.
Mm.
The whole scene is great. And it's so crazy that Marty happened to arrive on the exact date the Doc first envisioned the flux capacitor, of course, by accident. And I thought, like, also, what are the odds that Marty happened to be carrying around a photo of himself and his brother and sister?
Well, it was in his wallet, so it
right.
Wallet's in his pocket. It kind of
but it's like a full size, like, photo, like
it's not that big. It's like about yay big, I'd say.
Yeah, kind of weird that he'd be carrying that in his wallet, but okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, he had a good enough memory to convince Doc that he was telling the truth. But once Marty took Doc to show him the DeLorean, Doc was convinced.
Mm-hmm.
The back and forth about, like, it's like, who's the vice president? Jerry Lewis?
Yeah, great.
That whole thing was great.
I suppose Jane Weinman is the first lady, and Jack Benny's the Secretary of the Treasury.
Exactly, which Jane Wyman was married to Ronald Reagan at that time.
Nice.
Yeah, it was before he married Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, thankfully Marty also hung on to the camcorder and was able to play it on a 1955 TV.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not sure if those old TVs had, like, audio-video inputs that would have been compatible, but they made it happen.
Yep.
Also, super convenient that Marty held onto the flyer from the Save the Clock Tower, completely setting up the third act. But, of course, the biggest complication involves him admitting, I kind of bumped into my parents and interrupted their initial meeting. So that sets up the rest of the plot.
Well, another great little setup is when he says, like, that's cheap photographic trickery. They removed part of your brother's hair.
Yeah.
That was a great little scene. You don't usually catch that on the first viewing. This is why these movies are so good just to watch over and over. You catch little
absolutely
like that.
Absolutely. So Marty and Doc realized what they had to. So I guess either the next day or that Monday they go to Hill Valley High School. It's a good thing for them that security at schools were different than they are now, because, like, you have these guys, they just walk right in to the school.
Right.
That definitely wouldn't happen now.
Nope.
Especially, like, Doc, who's, like, a guy in his 30s, and this unknown teenager who they've never seen before. Just walk right in, and just immediately, oh, yeah, I'm the new kid.
Right.
And clearly George was always the target of bullies, yet Mr. Strickland yelled at him for being a slacker. Yeah. Which is like, Mr. Strickland's a dick, man.
Yeah, it's like, I love also Marty's lines, like, Mr. Strickland, Jesus, didn't that guy ever have hair?
Yeah, he looks like almost exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
Yeah, which was funny.
Yep.
So Marty attempts to introduce George to Lorraine, but it does not go well. Because Lorraine is clearly into Marty.
Yeah, she's not even looking at him.
And it's funny, because, like, I'm not sure why Marty is surprised at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it took Doc actually pointing it out for him to, like, really, like, fully get it. I think he was just in denial at that point.
Oh, yeah. I think we would all be in denial if our mothers started hitting on us.
Oh yeah, but it's like it's almost like it's so obvious that like that's why he left. Like she was like grabbing his arm. And he's like, this is getting creepy. No thanks.
Right.
Like she leaned in for a kiss for him several times before this. So it's like,
Mhm.
why are you surprised by this, Marty?
Right.
But thankfully, he realized that the enchantment under the sea dance happens to be that Saturday night.
Yep. Yeah, and that's set up too when she goes. It was the night of that horrible thunderstorm. Remember, George?
Exactly. Yeah. So in the cafeteria, Marty catches up with George, and he learns that George likes to write science fiction stories, and he's pleasantly surprised because I guess he's never really talked to his father about that sort of thing, or just never really saw that creative side of his dad growing up.
Mm-hmm.
But Marty gets to talk to him, and it's this really nice scene because like he's starting to notice that George has a lot of the same fear of rejection and insecurities that he does.
Yep.
So it's like this really nice moment where it's like he's getting to know his dad, but he overhears Biff and his gang like harassing Lorraine. And I kind of laugh because like I wrote down here, it's like she tells Biff, "You shut your mouth. I'm not that kind of girl." When as this movie goes on, I would beg to differ that she is that kind of girl.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she's into a guy, but
your behavior indicates otherwise, Lorraine. But of course, Marty is the one who intervenes and stands up for her and almost gets into a fight. Like he doesn't back down from Biff right before Strickland shows up.
Yeah, he does try to like fix his shirt.
Yeah,
and it's like I don't want to fight, but I will if I have to.
Yeah, Biff kind of lets him off with a warning, and then Strickland shows up. Thankfully, Strickland is distracted before he can start asking Marty any questions. Be like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?"
Yeah. Well, someone throws a paper airplane, and it's like discipline.
Yeah. So Strickland's on it. That gets him out of Marty's hair.
Mm-hmm.
So of course we hear the "make like a tree and get out of here" line.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Such a great line.
Yep.
But George has snuck away.
Yep.
Like he sees what's going on. He just sneaks away. He gets out of there.
Yeah.
So Marty eventually tracks down George again, and George is like, "Why are you still following me?" He's like, but he explains he's like, "Look, I really need you to ask Lorraine to the dance." But George says no. He's like, "Look, my favorite TV show, science fiction theater, that comes on Saturday night, and I'm not going to miss it."
Yep.
So that gives Marty an idea. Now, apparently, science fiction theater was a real show.
Yeah, it was. But no, when it says neither you nor anybody else on this planet is going to change my mind.
So that gives Marty an idea. Later that night, as George is sleeping in bed, Marty somehow sneaks into his room in a full radiation suit with Doc's blow dryer from the future and his Walkman.
Yep.
Good thing Marty kept like his Walkman in his backpack and all that.
Yeah.
Again, it's so convenient that he has all this stuff on him.
Mm-hmm.
So Marty places the headphones on George's ears and plays a Van Halen tape.
Yep.
Now, this isn't an actual Van Halen song, but I guess the band didn't sign off on it, but Eddie wanted to do it. So Eddie Van Halen recorded that specifically for this, which is pretty cool. And this, terrifies George. He's up terrified. He doesn't know what's happening. And I don't think that's Michael J. Fox's voice in the... I don't know what they did in post to make his voice sound like that, or if that's still... or if someone else did ADR for it, but, it doesn't sound like Fox at all.
I'm pretty sure it actually is. There's a... he definitely did the lines and everything, but there's a deleted scene that extends the actual scene, and
so he must have just did it in post.
I love Marty clearly doesn't know anything about science fiction, as you and I can. That's my name is Darth Beta. I'm an extraterrestrial from the planet Vulcan.
Oh no, he does know all that. He just knows that nobody's ever heard of it before.
Right.
Which is a recurring thing with Marty. He's Clint Eastwood, then he's then he's Calvin Klein in this one.
Right. And probably my favorite line in the movie, when it's like, "What made you change your mind?" It's like, last night Darth Vader came into my room and said, "If I don't ask Lorraine to the dance, they'd melt my brains."
Yeah, George, why don't we keep that between us? And it's just I write down here, I'm amazed that he's able to sneak into George's house in full radiation suit and not be seen or heard by George's parents, who we never see.
Well, a lot of these houses have little ledges that if you
I see Right, no, I see in the deleted scene that he's able to come in there, but like in the actual cut of the movie, it's just like it's one of those things where it's like, how the hell does he get in? I guess he comes in through the window. They don't have screen doors back then, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but so obviously in the deleted scene, they explain that they use chloroform to put George back to sleep.
Right.
And of course, Marty says, I think I overdid it. And so that explains why George overslept the next day.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, hopefully George didn't have like an important test that day.
They usually let you make up.
Right. So obviously the day after, George spots Marty at Lou's Cafe in downtown Hill Valley, and Marty's like, "Hey George, where were you? You weren't at school all day." And he explains that he overslept, which like that had to be so nerve-wracking for Marty, having to like he had to go there for the full school day and try to blend in while looking for his dad. Like that must have been a nightmare to do that.
Yeah.
Like,
or maybe he didn't go at all and he just no, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, he would have gone because he would have assumed that, like,
I imagine that Doc Brown put in Calvin Klein and like enrolled him somehow.
Maybe like just put it. Oh yeah, this is my nephew.
Yeah, exactly.
But they finally catch up, and George explains what happened, and Marty just tells him, it's like, let's keep that between ourselves. But it's like the important thing is like let's ask Lorraine to the dance.
Yeah.
And I was like, Jesus, George, it's a wonder I was even born. It's like, what? Nothing, never mind. So Marty finally helps George work up the courage to go in there. So he finally goes into the diner. I love the Lou, give me a milk, chocolate, and it slides down to him.
Yep.
Just total Western style, which is hysterical.
And they had to do that take a bunch of times so he kept missing it.
Oh, of course. It's such a crazy gag. Like, that would never happen, but it's
right.
Pretty funny. And I always laugh anytime you see this footage of like the 50s diners where it's like you'd have kids like up in the halls just dancing to the jukebox, just like Happy Days,
Yeah.
And Goldie is just hilariously animated in the background. He's dancing while he's like cleaning up the tables and making everyone laugh.
Classic Johnny Rockets flavor.
Exactly. So George, like he awkwardly kind of makes his way up. He's working up the courage to ask Lorraine to dance, and even though she doesn't understand what he's doing, it kind of seems like she's a little flattered and touched by it by the time he's able to get his words out.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if this would have worked, but until Biff and his crew enter the room and the music stops, of course, dramatically.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I write down, again, I have no idea why he doesn't want George in the diner, but he's ready to kick George's ass right until Marty steps in.
Yeah.
Yeah, after Marty steps in and backs him up, it's like, what the hell is that? And it actually works.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, this was probably a shot with Eric Stoltz's fist punching Biff in the face. And he miraculously managed to push Match Skinhead in 3D over like dominoes before running away. Like,
since he's Marty McFly and he's awesome.
Yeah, like they use that gag throughout the sequels, and it's like that would never happen.
Yeah.
But he runs away, knowing he's outnumbered, and just Lorraine sees this and immediately starts swooning over Calvin Klein right in front of George. And poor George, it's like, man, this guy worked up the courage to ask this girl out, and she starts like fawning over this other dude.
Yeah.
So as Marty runs away, he spots some kids on the sidewalk with what looks like a homemade boxcar toy on a plank with wheels.
Yeah.
And again, like, I'm not sure if that was a common thing in the 50s, but Marty asks to borrow it. Mm-hmm. Says, I'll give it back. He breaks off the top part of it.
Yeah.
And he says, like, this could kind of be used as a skateboard. Mm-hmm. So I guess in an interview, Robert Zemeckis said they wanted to imply that by time traveling, Marty inadvertently invents both skateboarding and rock and roll, which is kind of funny.
Which is all of our fantasies.
Yeah. So Marty grabs onto the back of a moving pickup truck and he thinks, okay, I'm home free. The only problem is Biff and his goons are about to switch from chasing Marty on foot to now using Biff's car.
Yep.
So, like, Biff wants to commit vehicular homicide in broad daylight as Marty tries to outrun a car on a skateboard.
Right.
Thankfully, he's mastered the art of grabbing onto the back of moving vehicles.
Exactly.
And of course, all the kids are watching this, and Lorraine is just smitten as he skates by. So, And I write down, this chase scene is just absolutely insane.
Mm.
Like, these are high school kids doing this. But, like, once Marty is finally stuck on the hood of Biff's car, Biff is planning on just ramming him into the back of a truck.
Yep.
Okay, not sure what this truck full of manure is doing in the middle of the town square, because that seems really unsanitary, even for 1955.
Yeah.
But it's there.
But hey.
Like, it seems like a weird thing to have parked in the middle of downtown. But all right.
It's not like there's farmland anywhere.
Right? Like why are you stopping in the middle of downtown? I don't know.
And it's between like hauling manure from one end of town to the other, maybe he has to go through the city center and maybe stop to get something to eat or something to drink.
I guess so, but it's weird.
Yeah.
And but anyway, so Marty pulls off this like crazy risky move by jumping onto the car, stepping through, and jumping onto the skateboard on the other side of the car.
Yep.
Like, it's amazed that he's not dead.
It's awesome.
Like he managed to land there perfectly and uses the momentum. He stops perfectly, like without falling, without anything. And of course, Biff and the guys are like understandably shocked and distracted.
Yep.
But they're too late to prevent their car from crashing into the manure truck. Now, thankfully, no one's injured,
right,
although they're covered in horse shit. So there's that.
Yeah.
So that's not great.
No.
So their pride is damaged, obviously. But
oh yeah,
pretty disgusting gag that they keep going back to in all three movies. Definitely not highbrow, but definitely a win for Marty in this scenario. But all it does is fuel Lorraine's desire to find out more about this mysterious stranger named Calvin Klein.
Yep.
Back at Doc's lab, Doc is watching the camcorder footage from 1985. Now, obviously, Doc suspects that something is going on, that he's going to be in some sort of danger.
Yeah.
But he's still like cautious about learning too much about his own future.
Exactly.
Of course, he can't help himself.
Yeah.
Like, I don't blame him.
Yeah.
So Marty walks in, and even though Doc tries to play it off, like Marty notices, that he has some concern, and he tries to talk to Doc about what happened that night. But Doc just doesn't want to hear it. He says, no, Marty, don't tell me. Like, knowing too much about my own future could make things even worse.
Yep, just like you've made things worse for yourself.
I could endanger my own existence just as you've endangered yours.
Yep.
But then changing the subject, Doc then shows Marty the model that he created for his plan to redirect the electricity from the lightning strike into the flux capacitor.
Mm-hmm.
And I laugh, like, it's funny how Doc just happens to have a scale model of Hill Valley just ready to go.
Well, it's not to scale, though. He didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint
it. But still, like, did he spend, like, all day building this?
Probably, yeah. I mean, think about it. Like, if you need to get something done, like, you'll find a way to get it done. Most of these things that we take several days to do.
It's so specific. That would have taken him weeks to build that. Like, he must have had that for other experiments, I guess.
Probably,
but
yeah.
I just thought that's such a weird, specific thing for him to have.
Mm-hmm.
But he had it, so.
Yep.
and as he's explaining the plan, it makes me wonder, like, could there not have been an easier way to harness electricity? I mean, couldn't they have gone to, like, some sort of power plant? I mean, he is a scientist that he probably could have figured out a way to do it, but, like, it's definitely a risky plan, but under the circumstances, that's all they've got right now.
Right.
So the part with the toy car on fire driving into the pile of clothes, I thought that was a pretty funny gag.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So meanwhile, as he's explaining this, Lorraine knocks on the door. She followed Marty all the way to the house. And she sort of, sheepishly admits to it.
Yeah.
But she was like, I was kind of hoping that you would ask me to the dance. Like, which is a pretty forward thing for a girl to do in 1955.
Which girls do that to me?
Right, like it just wasn't done, and it still isn't really a thing that's done.
Well, I mean, I think it's Snapchat now that they.
Well, yeah. That was going to go in a lot dirtier direction. We're not going to go there.
I was not. I don't know what's in your mind, but.
I've hung out with you long enough to know where your mind goes, sir. So, but Marty tries to mention, like, well, what about George? Didn't he ask you? And she says, well, no, he didn't ask me. And yeah, he's kind of cute and everything, but, like, but a man should be strong and protect the woman he loves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm it's like, yeah, can't argue with that. That's a good thing. So later on at George's house, it's probably the next day, Marty comes up with a plan for George to win Lorraine over. It's not a great plan, but he figures like, okay, maybe this could work.
Right.
I always love the Daddy-O line. I thought that was a fun.
Not picking a fight, Dad. Daddy-O.
Daddy. So, but Marty's plan is to like take advantage of Lorraine when he takes her to the dance, allowing George to theoretically step in, pretend to punch Marty, and be Lorraine's hero. Mm. Now, it's definitely a questionable plan.
Yeah.
Considering that Lorraine is clearly into Marty,
mm-hmm.
but like he's assuming that she wouldn't appreciate that sort of thing, which she does.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, under the circumstances, they're pretty desperate. They're running out of time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the best he can come up with right now.
Right.
But either way, like, despite the plan, it's a really nice scene between Marty and George. And, like, you get the feeling that these two are really becoming good friends.
Yeah.
And Marty's, like, encouraging George to be more confident. And, like, the line, like, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Yep,
it's like,
my favorite line in all of cinema.
Yeah, it's a really nice thing there, a nice heartfelt moment.
Mm-hmm. And true to life, too, it's like...
Yeah, no, it's great advice,
Yeah.
So later, as Saturday night rolls around, Doc has all the wires and the equipment set up downtown, and he's running a wire from the clock tower to the street light. And ironically, the weather report on the radio calls for clear skies.
Yep.
And while they're getting everything set up, Doc is saying how great it's going to be, just knowing that I'm going to be able to travel through time and that I'm going to invent a time machine. And you can tell Marty's heart is just breaking because he wants to tell Doc what's going to happen to him the night that he travels back through time.
Yep.
So later on in Lou's Cafe, Marty writes a letter that's going to warn Doc about what is fated to happen to him, and warns him take whatever precautions necessary, and he puts it in an envelope that says "Do not open until 1985." Mm-hmm. So meanwhile, on the street, Doc is approached by a local patrolman, a policeman, asking him what all the equipment is, and Doc says it's for a weather experiment.
Yep.
And when the patrolman, he asks him, do you have a permit for that? Doc says yes.
Of course.
And of course, in the deleted scene, he just slips the patrolman a $50 bill.
Yep.
Just to bribe him. So,
Yeah.
I guess that's one way of getting it done, but obviously it's super illegal what he's doing there.
Yeah. One great thing though about the movie is how they were able to. They have a lot of great deleted scenes that do add to character and answer some questions, but at the same time, they took out stuff that like wasn't completely necessary.
Yeah, just they wanted to keep the pacing a little more tight.
Yeah, and I just respect them so much for that because certain other filmmakers don't quite have that.
Absolutely, no, they understand how quickly the movie's paced. They want to really get to the plot and try to trim the fat a little bit.
Yeah.
So while all this is going on, Marty slips the envelope into a pocket, in Doc's jacket. So that hopefully the Doc will discover it later. Meanwhile, at the dance in the school, we cut to Marvin Berry and the Starlighters, the band that's they're playing a piece of music. It's called Night Train. It's a jazz standard. It's a great instrumental sax solo.
Yeah,
it was originally co-written and recorded by a guy named Jimmy Forrest.
Nice.
And it's basically a jazz standard by this point. Now, while all this is happening, we actually see George. The guy's not a bad dancer.
Yeah, no, he's got.
Like I know he's supposed to be like a big dork and not have rhythm, but it's like, all right, he can dance a little bit.
Yeah, well, people surprise you.
Like I don't know if they were playing that for laughs, like, oh, look at what an awkward dancer he was. But like that, he didn't look too bad.
Yeah, look better.
He had a little bit of rhythm.
Yeah, but better than Spider-Man 3 for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's not even get into that.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, outside of the gym, Marty and Lorraine, they pull up in Doc's Rolls Royce. Mm-hmm. Marty suggests that they stay in the car and they park for a little bit.
Yeah, which is a euphemism for making out.
Oh yeah, that was a slang term the kids used back then.
Yeah.
But Lorraine is all for it. She's like, yeah, no, that's a great idea. And he's like, what?
I'm almost 17 years old. I've never parked. It's not like I've never parked before.
So clearly Marty's starting to see through. It's like, this plan might not be working so well.
And he's learning all these things about his mom.
It completely flies in the face of everything that his mom would tell him years later, growing up. So Lorraine then pulls out a flask that she swiped from her mom's liquor cabinet, and Marty kind of steps in. And he's like, Lorraine, you shouldn't drink so much. You might regret that later in life. And it's a great back and forth to see him showing concern, and she's like, "Oh, Marty, you're starting to sound like my mother."
Right. And the look on Michael J. Fox's face is just brilliant when it's like, huh?
So I guess Marty reluctantly takes a sip from the flask. I guess probably just trying to calm himself down at that point. I don't really see Marty as being a big drinker either.
Oh no.
But he's probably doing that just trying to go with the flow and take the edge off. But he does the world's biggest spit take when he sees Lorraine light up a cigarette.
Yeah.
But I feel like he would have known that his mom smokes, and I'm pretty sure she was still smoking throughout his childhood.
Right.
I think she was still smoking in 1985.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that she was chain smoking. I think it was just surprised that she was doing it at
when she was that young.
At his age.
Right. Yeah.
Because she's always talking about how she never did that stuff as a kid.
Right. So, but yeah, the line about Marty sounding just like her mom was pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, inside the auditorium, or I think it's the gym, because the gym has a stage. Yeah. It's like the gym/auditorium.
Yeah.
So George looks at the time and realizes oh my gosh, I'm almost late for the plan. So he rushes outside. Meanwhile, back in the car, Lorraine is asking Marty why he's so nervous, because he's probably like, man, George is supposed to be here by now.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also having a tough time going through with this.
Oh yeah.
She's like, why is he so nervous? And I'm thinking man, clearly Lorraine has been around the block a little bit at 17.
Yeah.
She's got some experience.
Yeah.
So Marty tries to explain. He's like, look, I know I'm supposed to do something, but I'm not sure if I can go through with it.
Mm-hmm.
Lorraine misunderstands what he's saying, just thinking oh, well, this guy's a virgin. He's never,
Right.
But she misunderstands, and she tries to calm him down by making the first move.
Yep.
She goes in for a kiss, and it's it leans in for one of the most unintentionally incestuous kisses ever caught on film.
Yep. Ever since the most incestuous kiss since Empire Strikes Back.
And Marty's reaction is priceless. He's horrified. But suddenly Lorraine kind of puts two and two together. She kind of realized that, okay, something's wrong. I feel like kissing you is like kissing my brother, which is she must have sensed something about him to oh my God, I might be related to this guy.
Right.
I don't know if she completely puts two and two together.
I don't think she puts two and two together. It's just a feeling that she has when kissing him, it just feels wrong.
Yeah.
Which sometimes happens with two people, they're attracted to each other, but, when they kiss, it just, nothing feels right.
It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So despite having this moment of clarity, the car door opens, and Marty thinks it's George going through with the plan, but he's stunned to find that it's Biff and his crew, and Biff is drunk, and he's seeking revenge for the car crash.
Yep.
So Biff's guys hold Marty back while Biff punches Marty right in the stomach.
Oh yeah.
And Lorraine is protesting. She's yelling at Biff, but Biff turns to her, and he sees this as an opportunity to have his way with her.
Yep.
So now we can add attempted murder and sexual assault to Biff's rap sheet.
At attempted rape, really.
Oh yeah. So Biff tells the guys to dispose of Marty while he has his way with Lorraine.
Mm-hmm.
So match skinheaded 3D. They take Marty and they throw him in
car.
They throw him in the trunk of the car that's owned by the Starlighters, the band.
Accidentally, it was the closest car to them, and they're like, put him in.
Yeah. Now I never saw them throw the keys into the trunk.
It was they were already there when.
Yeah, I guess the trunk was open for some reason, but the band was inside, and they were obviously smoking some pot, just had a little toke before they go back on.
Mm-hmm.
And the drummer, who I think his name is Bob,
right?
They put that in the Because I remember as a kid, I read like the novel that based on the screenplay is like
Right.
Bob Johnson, I think was his name.
Yeah.
But the drummer gets out, and like once 3D calls him, is like, "Beat it, Spook. This don't concern you."
Yeah.
Which is funny. Like Spook is one of those
term. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those like old timey racial slurs that you don't really hear anymore.
Right.
It's like, who you called a spook, Peckerwood? Like,
Yeah.
like I'm like, was Peckerwood like a slang for white guys?
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Well, there's certain features between that are stereotyped between these two.
Right.
People.
I'm not going to go down the list of like old timey racial slurs because I don't want to get banned by YouTube.
Yeah.
But clearly, it's like one of those things where it's like it's a good thing that they are old timey. That means people don't say these things anymore.
Exactly.
Thankfully. So the rest of the band gets out and they chase the way because like these guys are grown ass men and it's like there are like 5 of them and only 3 of Biff's guys, so they run away. I'm not sure why the trunk was open in the first place, but Marty tells like
the keys are in here.
Yeah, I guess Marvin and Bob stay behind.
Yep.
He's like the keys are in here. So it's just one of those things that seem to occur because the plot needs it to.
Right.
So meanwhile, back at Doc's car, George is approaching, thinking that that's Marty inside the car with Lorraine.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm sure as he's walking up, he's probably thinking like, man, this guy Marty is really going for it.
Yeah.
It's like he's really getting into character here.
Mm-hmm.
So George opens the door as planned, but he's surprised to find that it's Biff instead.
Yep.
And he's like, he doesn't know what to do. Like he's genuinely scared at this point. So like Biff like tells us like, you got the wrong car, McFly. You bet just get out of here. Just walk away. But then Lorraine pokes her head up and she's like, oh my God, George, help me. Yeah. And even though George is scared of Biff, like he stays.
Like he finally works up the courage.
He works up the courage. He's like, no, Biff, you leave her alone.
Because he's not the one like in danger this time. This time someone else is in danger of a serious.
Yeah, and he obviously has feelings for Lorraine as well.
Yeah.
Even though they haven't really met,
mm-hmm.
but like he kind of likes her at this point. Like he knows of her, but like they haven't really met by this point. But like she's in danger, and like even though he's scared to death of Biff, like he's like, no, this isn't right. So Biff gets out and moves toward George, and like he's getting ready to swing at George, but George tries to throw the first punch, and obviously it's a very weak like punch, and Biff catches it and catches George in like an armbar, basically like a standing armbar. Meanwhile, back at the Starlighters car, Marvin and the band, they're trying to use a screwdriver to get Marty out of the trunk. And they do that, but Marvin slices his hand in the process. So, but Marty says thanks real quick, but he knows that his parents
they're in trouble.
He knows that they're in trouble somehow. That they've got to run back, especially because Biff's there.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Lorraine is trying to get Biff off of George. She's like, stop it, Biff, and she jumps on his back, tries to intervene, tries to rush.
Mm-hmm.
But Biff shoves her to the ground pretty forcefully.
Yeah, so he can.
And seeing that happen, that was all George needed.
Yep.
To kind of like just summon whatever strength and courage he could, as he balled up his fist and just punched Biff square in the jaw. Like it was a direct hit. Like he knocked him out.
The most satisfying punch in cinematic history.
Like you feel like you can't help but root for George in this moment. Yeah, George, like. Because I mean, look, we all have a little bit of George McFly in us at one point or another. Like we've all been in that sort of situation. But like he actually just knocks Biff out, and feels that rush of adrenaline. He can't believe he's still processing what happened. Mm-hmm. George is just amazed that he finally stood up to Biff, and he helps Lorraine to her feet.
Yep.
And they walk away just arm in arm as she just like is immediately impressed, and they start to fall in love. As Marty and the other students, they look on. Now I'm not sure why the other high school kids were outside. Maybe they thought the dance was over.
I think they heard the commotion.
Yeah, and like the band was taking a break.
Yeah.
So maybe they were just waiting for the band to come back on because they hadn't come back in yet.
Right.
But either way, they heard the commotion outside, and like all the other students are like, wow, that was George, and he like kind of earns their respect and admiration. It's just a beautifully done scene.
Yeah.
even though it wasn't meant to happen like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was just a really cool like outcome out of this chaotic situation. So back at the clock tower, it's around 9:30, and Doc is starting to realize that despite the forecast, the storm is starting to come in just as Marty said it would.
Mm-hmm.
So back at the high school, realizing that the dance is almost over, Marty rushes back to the Starlighters to try and get them back on stage. But Marvin's hand was really badly sliced while he was trying to get Marty out of the trunk. And even though Marvin can still sing, it's like no way, man. The dance is over. Like
unless you know someone else who can play the guitar.
Which, as it happens, Marty can play guitar.
Exactly.
So we immediately cut to the band on stage with Marty filling in on guitar as Marvin sings Earth Angel.
Yep.
And supposedly the actor who played Marvin that's his real voice. Like he's a really good singer.
Mm-hmm.
The guy sounds great. So as the band plays on stage, Marty carefully watches George and Lorraine on the dance floor. And Marty keeps the picture of himself, Dave and Linda, in like the guitar headstock, like right in the tuning fork. And although the images of Dave and Linda haven't returned yet, he sees, George and Lorraine slow dancing, and like their feelings of each other are beginning to grow. And Lorraine asks George if he's going to kiss her. And before George can make a move, this guy Dixon, this redheaded guy who we'd seen earlier, he is another one of George's tormentors from earlier in the movie. He drunkenly cuts in and grabs Lorraine away from him. And Dixon isn't really a big guy. He just seems like this just annoying little shit. Like really, like just seems like a creep.
Yeah.
But this causes Marty to start to fade away, fearing that if George doesn't kiss Lorraine, he won't end up being together and he won't be born.
Yeah.
Although George awkwardly hesitates for a second there, he eventually just shoves Dixon on his ass and kisses Lorraine on the dance floor.
Yeah. He seizes the day.
Yes, effectively repairing the timeline and ensuring Marty's existence. Now, it makes me wonder if this would have happened in the original timeline anyway. So I don't know.
Not that particularly. I think the original timeline is like they danced together and then they kissed each other.
Okay.
Without
adrenaline. Dixon. Yeah. Coming in, but either way, like it's kind of one of those scenes where it's like it's a little bit much as far as repairing the timeline and him fading away like that. It's definitely done for dramatic effect.
I mean, when he just pushes him down, it's like awesome.
Yeah.
But no, do you see the deleted scene where he gets trapped in the phone booth?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. It's the same guy doing that.
And Strickland's worst principal ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Strickland just leaves him there.
Yeah.
So, but as George and Lorraine kiss, Marty is just rejuvenated, and he regains his ability to play guitar, and he finishes the song.
Yep.
Now, despite Marty realizing that he needs to get his ass back to Doc in less than 30 minutes, Marvin and the band, they beg Marty to play one more song.
Yep.
Which, I don't know why. Clearly, this guy was having a tough time during Earth Angel, but regardless.
At the same time, he did finish strong, and it's not like they had other options.
They're like, hey, let's do one more song, something that's really up-tempo, something that really cooks, So Marty reluctantly agrees, and he takes the mic. So he gets an idea to play a song that would be... It's like, okay, what can I play that would be appropriate to the time period?
Yeah.
So he explains the song. It's like, all right, well, this song is an old one where I come from. Thankfully, no one asks him where he comes from.
Right. It's an oldie, and it's like...
well, it's an oldie where I come from.
They don't know what that means.
Yeah. So after queuing up the band and Marty explains to him, he launches into Johnny Be Good, which was originally written and recorded by, as we find out, Marvin Berry's cousin, Chuck Berry. And this song would not be released for another 3 years. But, Marty was pretty close.
Yeah.
So Marty's singing voice was provided by a guy named Mark Campbell. And that's, once again, Paul Hansen on doing Marty's guitar parts. They never came out...
Well, Michael J. Fox did know how to play the song, and so, he was able to mimic it.
Right.
It's great.
And so, and the guy, Mark Campbell, his voice sounded a lot like Michael J. Fox. So people kind of thought that was really Michael J. Fox singing.
Yeah,
so, and they never came out and said it until years later.
Yeah.
And so as George and Lorraine and all the other kids are dancing to the song, another couple approaches them. They congratulate George on punching out Biff in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And they ask him if has he ever thought about running for class president. So So George has this newfound confidence and just a new lease on life.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was going to say, I clearly wrote down that it's pretty obvious that most of the kids at Hill Valley High School in 1955 happen to be professional dancers.
Right. Yeah.
That's weird. It's almost like they know what to do immediately.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they did in the 50s. You know, they had dance.
Yeah, it's left over from the swing era.
Exactly.
You know.
But,
So
so then Marty gets he finishes the song, with the classic scene of just doing all the crazy stuff that.
Yeah.
That we.
I was going to get to that.
Yeah.
I was going to get to that in a second, but I was going to say I often wonder if Chuck Berry had indeed heard Johnny B. Good playing over the phone, which there's no way he would have heard that clearly over the phone.
Mm.
But like, would he still have written it if he had heard someone else doing it?
Right.
Because it's like not writing it would have had an impact on music history.
Yeah.
But then this phone call suggests that he's a plagiarist, that he ripped it off.
Right.
And of course, Zemeckis implied in this scenario that Marty retroactively invents rock and roll.
Yep.
But I love definitely plays homage to Chuck Berry as well as Pete Townsend, Jimi Hendrix, and Eddie Van Halen on stage.
And
all those movies.
Angus Young.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, Angus Young. So the crowd is just stunned silent as he's just like shredding and just. It's such a great moment as the band stops and like everyone just stops and looks like what.
Yeah, and then they
and it's just
they pay back you guys are just too darn loud when it has Strickland like covering his ears.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. But Marty's like, I guess you guys aren't ready for that.
Yeah.
Your kids are gonna love it.
Yeah.
Just classic.
Yep.
I would say arguably one of the best musical performances in film history.
Yeah.
Is right there.
I agree.
It's definitely one of the most memorable.
Oh yeah.
So, after the dance, Marty bids farewell to his future parents, and he congratulates them on their new relationship. And he throws in that funny line about, if you guys ever have kids and he accidentally sets fire to the rug, make sure you go easy on him. So, I'm curious how exactly he set fire to the rug there when he was 8 years old, but definitely curious about what happened there. But I also loved Lorraine's line, "Oh, Marty, that was very interesting music."
Yeah.
I also wrote down, it's kind of weird that they casually accept that he's leaving town after being in their school for less than a week.
Yeah.
And then they ask, "Will we ever see you again?" As if that's something that just happens normally.
Right.
You know,
no, they probably figure that he's like a military brat and he moves around a lot.
Good callback, yeah. It's like, but it really does make you wonder about how drastically the McFly family timeline is changed by the events of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like the dynamics of George and Lorraine's relationship, even if Marty is successful in bringing that back together, who knows how this would have changed Marty's life? Like there could still be a chance that he might not have been born, or that his older brother Dave might have been named Marty instead of him.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so many things that could have gone wrong in this scenario.
Yeah.
But as we also learn in part 3, Martin McFly is a family name as well.
Yeah.
So that's sort of retroactively put in there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just wondering, it's like, would George and Lorraine have wondered why Calvin Marty Klein had suddenly disappeared without a trace?
Right.
Would Lorraine ever track down Doc Brown to ask what happened to his nephew?
Right.
Like, especially when he guaranteed them that he would see them again.
Right.
So, I mean, like, I'm sure, would George have questions about this years later once Marty is born?
There's a comic that actually addresses it.
I know, but it's still funny to think about because obviously, like, we don't know. But like, would he, once his son Marty is born, would he recognize that he resembles that strange kid that he knew for a short time?
Like when he's growing up,
who his wife used to have a crush on.
Right.
You ever think he's wondering? It's like, hey, Lorraine, you ever wonder why our son Marty looks like that kid Marty?
Yeah.
That you used to have a thing for back in high school?
At the same time, it's like...
Is there something you want to tell me, Lorraine? Like, what's going on here?
Of course, again, like, you're 47, high school was so long ago.
True.
This is a kid who was there only for a week.
Right.
And...
Like, how much do they really remember? They don't really have photos of this guy.
Yeah,
thankfully.
Exactly. And also there's if you go back to your, freshman, junior, senior, prom, whatever, how many of those dates that you actually went on and how many of them do you actually remember?
Right.
Like the first person I ever took to a dance, I remember generally what she looked like, but if she walked down the street, there's no way I'd be able, or even if I saw a picture of her, there's no way I would be able to,
Gotcha.
to pick her
Well,
out.
I went to a very small private school, so I pretty much knew everybody.
Right.
So that's probably true.
Yeah.
So later on, we cut to the clock tower where I love Doc's damn.
Like, I was like, damn, where is that kid? Like, dang.
So funny.
He's looking at a different watch every time. He's like, damn.
Right.
So
So at the clock tower, Marty pulls up in Doc's car, once again wearing his 1985 clothes.
Yep.
And Doc, understandably, is pretty mad that he's running behind schedule and that he stopped to change.
Right.
You know?
They can come back in that zoot suit.
Right.
Great. Man.
I do appreciate how Doc is legitimately concerned that Marty has still fundamentally changed his parents' lives.
Right.
Even though, I mean, he still ensured his own existence, but Doc just gives him a look. He's like, all right, well, we'll just have to hope for the best at this point.
Yeah,
because we're running out of time.
And that's Christopher Lloyd's just excellent acting chops.
Yeah.
And
he can do all that stuff without saying a word.
Yeah, and like
it's like, never mind all that.
Yeah.
So Doc explains what they need to do next, and you can see the sadness in Marty's face when he gives Doc what he thinks could be his final goodbye as they hug. And just the best line is like, as long as you hit that wire with the connecting hook at precisely 88 miles per hour, the instant the lightning strikes the clock tower, everything will be fine. Like, it's just, this plan is just insane.
Yeah.
But Doc accidentally feels the letter that Marty left in his jacket.
Mm-hmm.
But he pulls it out and he confronts Marty about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, despite Marty's protest, Doc refuses to hear the information about his future and tears the letter to pieces. Although I will note that we never see Doc throw out the pieces of his letter.
No, he doesn't throw out the pieces.
He puts it back into his pocket without even thinking.
And that's how he tapes it back together later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good foreshadowing. So Marty then attempts to tell Doc face to face, but the high winds and a fallen branch causes one of the connecting wires to the tower to disconnect and fall to the ground. Now, absolutely horrified, Marty and Doc scramble to secure it with a rope so they can lift it up and hopefully reconnect it. Now, Doc is somehow able to enter the courthouse after hours.
Right. Yeah,
this is something I noticed. Like, was the door unlocked? Did he have a key, or did he just straight up break into a government building?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Either that, or maybe there's a separate place where you can go in to see the bell tower.
I mean, I doubt it.
Yeah.
It is a public courthouse. So Doc reaches the roof. He's able to climb out and throw Marty the rope so that Marty can tie it to the cable and help like snake it up, pulley it that way. And now as Doc is hooking the cables back together, Marty tries to tell Doc about what happens on the night that he traveled back in time. But the wind is just too loud, and so is the bell when the clock strikes 10 o'clock.
Right.
So Marty knows that he's running out of time, so he knows he has to get into the DeLorean and drive it to the starting point that Doc had set for him. Now, somehow Doc had the time to paint a starting line and a caption in the road before all this.
Well, I mean, how much, not many people in the town square, everyone's at the dance, he's not doing anything with the people, and he could have done it.
Yeah, there are no cars on the road, by the way. They're all parked, and no businesses are open, so nobody sees that. I'm going to point that out later, by the way.
Yeah.
Just how crazy that is. So, again, Christopher Lloyd, Doc, climbing out to reach the cable, and all his facial expressions, the physical comedy, it's perfect. Like how great he was in this role, just as physical as he was.
Can we just talk about how intense this final scene is?
Oh,
every single time
it's so nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
It really is.
And there's not that many movies that, you're tense. Even if you know what's going to happen, you're still tense because of how well they build up.
There are so many little things that can and do go wrong, yet they manage to pull it out.
Yep.
So as Marty pulls the DeLorean to the starting line, he's just frustrated. He won't have enough time to tell Doc about his fate in 1985, but then it occurs to him that since he's in a time machine, he has the chance to go back earlier than the exact moment he left. So he switches the settings to 10 minutes before he leaves, which really isn't a lot of time.
Right.
I mean, I suppose he could have set it to come back earlier, but I guess he understands that it would be too risky if he runs into himself.
Yep.
And he finally appreciates, like, who knows what kind of paradox that might create.
Right.
So, but I guess he figures that 10 minutes is the best he's going to do, even with that short window of time. I love the line, flux capacitor, fluxing.
Fluxing. I love how, like, the starter doesn't work, and apparently DeLoreans were notorious for that.
Yeah.
And how he just, like, hits his head on the wheel, and that
like he's the Fonz.
Finally.
Yeah. And the whole science behind the DeLorean hitting the wire at the exact moment of the lightning strike is pretty insane when you think about it.
Oh yeah.
But it's one of those things that, like, it makes just enough sense where it kind of sounds plausible, where it's like you buy it.
Well, there's a special of the physics of Back to the Future, and where theoretical physicist Michio Kaku, he talks about it, and he says of all the time machine, time travel movies, the one that's the most accurate is Back to the Future.
I would agree. Like, they have a particular set of rules that they're fairly consistent with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very important for a time travel type of thing. So, it does make me wonder, like what could have been their backup plan had this not worked?
Yeah.
I'm sure they could have figured something out, but it definitely makes for a lot of suspense. So just before the timer that Doc set on the dashboard goes off, Marty is horrified when the electricity suddenly goes out, stalling the engine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in part 3, obviously, it establishes that the car does run on regular gas, but the electrical battery must still be running pretty low.
Right.
Meanwhile, Doc is just hanging on for dear life from the clock at this point, as the cable is hooked into his foot.
Yeah.
And he's like trying to keep it from falling down. Yeah, meanwhile, Marty's just panicking. He's trying to do his best to get the DeLorean to restart, and bangs his head on the steering wheel in frustration, which seems to do the trick as he puts the car in gear and takes off, just hoping to get where he needs to be in time. Meanwhile, on top of the tower, Doc is just about to connect the two wires when the fallen branch has reduced the amount of slack necessary to pull the wires to reach each other. So Doc pulls with all his strength, but in doing so, he has caused the other end of the wire to disconnect from the streetlights.
Such a great...
And he is screaming in horror, knowing that they have less than a minute to fix it.
That's so good. Like, barely, he has seconds to fix it.
I know, as if the scene wasn't tense enough.
Yeah.
So knowing that the lightning and Marty are approaching in seconds, Doc wraps some of the wire around the clock like the minute hand, and he rappels down to the ground. Good thing he wore gloves, by the way.
Yeah.
Good thing he wore gloves and he didn't kill his hands. He ziplines right down, and he frantically frees the downed wire from underneath the branch and connects it just as the lightning strikes. It's amazing he didn't get electrocuted and die himself,
right,
and get killed himself as this happens. But just as Marty hits the target right on time and successfully jumps into the future.
You have that great little after effect of the fire.
Yeah, which technically shouldn't have happened if Doc's timer and calculations were 100% correct.
Right.
Because Marty started driving a couple seconds after he was supposed to. But the mission was a success, nevertheless.
Right.
And I wrote down here, the most amazingly unbelievable part about this whole thing is that there were 0 witnesses to any of this. All right? And there were several cars parked on the street. But I mean, I guess all the shops are closed on 10 a.m. on a Saturday. I get it. It's a small town in the 50s, but
it's 10 p.m.
10 p.m. at night on the 50s in the middle of downtown square on a Saturday night. But I guess the town just shuts down. But there are no witnesses at all.
Yeah.
And I guess
it's also bad.
And I'm assuming Doc isn't arrested after this.
Right. Well, it's also bad weather in the area,
True.
So everyone's being advised to stay inside.
Maybe, yeah. But it's hopefully Doc isn't arrested after this. We don't know. We don't see. But Doc celebrates in the street as we seamlessly cut back to the same location in 1985. And I was writing this down. It's like, man, In 1985, Hill Valley looks pretty rough with all that litter on the streets and in the courthouse, which goes to show you Goldie Wilson was not successful. He did not, in fact, clean up this town as mayor. So I liked Goldie a lot, but maybe he wasn't a particularly good mayor.
Yeah.
But we see, this homeless man sleeping on a park bench, listening to the radio. Not sure what song he was listening to, but it must have been on the soundtrack.
It's an Eric Clapton song.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it's called. Can't remember what it's called right now, but I can look it up.
Okay. Well, while this is happening, Marty and the DeLorean, they appear in the sonic booms, and the DeLorean crashes right through the front door of the Assembly of Christ Church, which was the movie theater in 1955. Marty is very lucky that there were no other cars or people on the road when he decided to return at that exact time, and thankfully, Red, the homeless man, is the only witness to this, but he just sort of shrugs it off. It's like, oh, crazy drunk driver. So Marty recognizes him, calls him by his name, Red, which someone had suggested that the homeless guy was Red Thomas, who was the mayor in 1955, but
it could be a kid, but definitely not Red.
Yeah, Zemeckis and Gale confirmed that that's not the same guy.
Yeah.
But apparently Marty knows this guy. He recognizes him. I guess he's just the town drunk.
Right.
It's like, how do Marty and Red know each other? But I digress.
Yeah. Well, Marty had a lot of independence, apparently.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, he's hanging out with Doc Brown, and he knows Red. So, according to Bob Gale, Michael J. Fox just ad-libbed that line.
Right.
Ad-libbed. It's like, oh, Red, you're here too, and they just kept it in.
Yeah. It works.
So, yeah, no, it definitely works. He's like, you guys look great. Everything looks great. And I'm like, the town did not look so great. Yeah, Marty looks at the clock, and I never noticed the Bank of America logo until recently. Never noticed how different it was back then. But he looks at the clock and he thinks that he might just have just enough time to save Doc, so he gets back in the car, but it stalls out once again.
Yeah.
Once again as he goes to start it. Meanwhile, the Libyans' van, it passes right by him.
Yep.
And Marty watches in horror. He's like, oh no. So Marty has no choice but to run to the mall on foot, which is over 2 miles away, by the way.
Yeah.
And hope to catch up as soon as he can. So that's a long way to run.
Yes, sir.
So meanwhile, back at the mall parking lot, which is formerly the Twin Pines Mall, now the Lone Pine Mall in this timeline, Marty is exhausted as he finally arrives, only to watch in horror as Doc is once again gunned down in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as he watches in anguish, he hears his past self cry out before he gets the chance to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
So Marty watches his past self escape from the Libyans and hop into his DeLorean. Basically, he watches the chase scene from earlier in the movie, just at a different angle.
Yeah. And
watches his own past unfold. As the car chase goes on, Marty rolls down the hill, just hoping not to be seen, as the original DeLorean jumps back to 1955. And as this happens, the Libyans crash their van into this photo hut at full speed. Now, they're completely taken out at this point. It's like, did they just get killed? We don't know. They're dead for all we know. We're not sure what happens. But seeing his past self safely travel through time, Marty rushes over to Doc's side. And he's devastated. He thinks he's too late. Mm-hmm. But as Doc rolls over, his eyes and mouth are wide open. He looks like he's actually dead.
Yeah.
But maybe he was just unconscious.
He was faking it, yeah.
Or he might have actually been unconscious and still coming to. But either way, he slowly comes to, much to Marty's surprise. So Doc unzips his radiation suit to reveal that he has a Kevlar vest underneath.
Yep.
And he's very lucky that the Libyans did not shoot him in the head or anywhere else on his body. So Marty asks how Doc knew, since he never got the chance to tell him what happened. And Doc reaches into his pocket to reveal the now 30-year-old letter that Marty wrote, which Doc has apparently taped back together after having a change of heart. So clearly curiosity got the better of Doc, and it worked out in this case. Assuming that Doc was legitimately killed in the original timeline, which, like I mentioned earlier, we'll never really know for sure.
Right.
He could have partaken he could have taken precautions back then, because he did carry a gun. But we'll never know.
But at the same time, it's not a very good gun.
Right.
And he didn't bother to really check that it was loaded, so he definitely wasn't expecting them.
Right. So, but Doc gives Marty a ride back home in the DeLorean, and as Marty gets out, they talk about how Doc and Einstein will continue his original plan.
Yep.
This time to travel 30 years into the future.
Yeah.
So Marty bids him farewell and asks Doc to look him up when he gets there.
Yep.
So Doc then drives down Marty Street. I feel like there's no way he could have gotten up to 88 there, but whatever. He time travels, and as the time machine goes off and the sonic booms go off, thankfully no one wakes up at it has to be 2 to 3 a.m. by this point. We don't know if the cops ever got there. Hopefully they didn't have to explain to the cops what was going on.
Right.
But they got out of there. They managed to get the DeLorean jump started again. So we cut to the next morning. Marty's alarm clock goes specifically at 10:28 a.m. with Back in Time playing on the radio. And Marty is once again fully passed out in bed, sprawled face down in all his clothes. Yeah. And he wonders if it was all a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
So he walks into the living room, and it looks completely different.
Yep.
The furniture and home decor is much nicer.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Dave and Linda are eating breakfast and acting much differently.
Mm-hmm.
Linda is dressed much more elegantly, a little less frumpy than she was in the original timeline.
Yep.
And apparently is just beating guys away left
and right.
Beating guys away left and right. She's just the most popular girl in town, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Dave is wearing a suit and tie and reading Forbes magazine. When Marty asks, I don't know if they still live at home or what, but they're having breakfast there. So Marty asks, what's going on here? What the hell is this? And she's like, breakfast? You want some? So clearly Dave no longer works at Burger King.
Yeah.
I don't know what his new job is. It's never really explained.
Yeah.
Or why he's going to the office on a Saturday morning. But okay. Whatever. So Marty then nearly passes out as he sees his parents enter the room.
Mm-hmm.
They've just returned from a friendly game of tennis.
Yep.
So Marty is shocked at how happy and youthful they seem, and how much healthier and thinner his mom appears. And George is much more playful and flirtatious with Lorraine. He pinches her on the butt right there, and just walks in. I'm like, I like his style.
Yeah.
I like your style, George McFly. I try to get away with that myself from time to time, and it doesn't always work.
Right.
But I digress.
Yep. Movies.
Lorraine in particular is a lot more pleasant and just overall much more beautiful and radiant at age 47 than in the original timeline. She's still very attractive.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and she's much more supportive of Marty and Jennifer's relationship.
Yep.
Just fully aware and approving of their trip to the lake that weekend. So I guess probably she has less insecurities, so maybe she's just more willing to be cool with her son's girlfriend, I guess. I don't know.
I think just that, she's had these, she's happier where she is, of course, and
yeah, she feels less guilty about her own actions,
and she's not she's letting go of the past and not trying to make up for her past mistakes.
Right.
Her own kids.
Yeah, not trying to be something that she's not.
Exactly.
So when Marty asks, it's like, what do you mean going to the lake? I can't. We crashed Dad's car, and everyone's
what?
And everyone's shocked. What? The car's wrecked. So they go outside, and George opens the door to reveals that there was no wreck.
Right.
Instead of the 1979 Toyota that George was driving, it's a brand new BMW.
Right.
Which is being waxed and polished by Biff Tannen, who in this new timeline, he apparently owns his own auto detailing service, and it appears to be a much, at least on the outside anyway, he's a much nicer guy.
Yeah.
He's much more humble and very polite and is nice to the kids. At least on the outside. I mean, chances are he's still the same guy inside, but he's
in the third movie he kind of reveals his true colors when when Marty comes back and he's like, "Hey, butthead, Like, oh, Marty.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't see you there.
Yeah.
But at least he's acting pretty nice, and that's a start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, I mean it's a start. I mean, at least he's trying to be a better person in this timeline. So once George kind of calls him out for not doing what he said, it's like, now Biff, don't con me.
Right.
So Biff apologizes and says, "I'm sorry, Mr. McFly," and it's like you could tell he's really trying to lay it on thick, Mr. McFly.
Yep.
So.
Also, because he knows that George can, beat him up.
Or yeah, I guess, or that the shoe's on the other foot.
Right.
George is hiring him, and he's at least trying to act like a nicer guy, even though whether he is or he isn't, it's probably not. But the effort's there at least. Definitely. And so, George kind of good-naturedly laughs off Biff. It's like, oh, Biff, what a character.
Right.
I've had to stay on top of him ever since high school. Which is like, no, you haven't.
Right.
No, you haven't, George. You used to be terrified of him.
Right.
But he acknowledges that if not for Biff, he and Lorraine would not have gotten together.
Right.
Which, if not for stopping this guy from committing full-on rape, you would not have won the heart of your future wife.
Right.
And yet, you still hired this person years later to work on your car, and he's in your home.
Yeah. Oh, and she's totally fine with it too, which is another.
Yeah, that's pretty messed up, dude.
Yeah.
This guy sexually assaulted your wife, but you're okay with it years later.
Right.
And still, why would you hire this guy? I mean, obviously, I know why he's in the movie and doing what he does. It's one of those logical things where it's like
the implications are much bigger than we think when we first see the movie.
Oh yeah. Well, as you're a kid, you don't think about these things.
Yeah.
But it's like that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But clearly George is a very patient and forgiving individual, much more than I would be in that situation. Yeah. But later on, Biff walks in the house very excitedly and even says, "Oh, hi, Marty," very friendly, he's nice to the kids. Before he lets the McFlys know that a copy of George's new book has arrived.
Yep.
George apparently this is his first published
novel
book. Yeah, his first novel.
Yeah.
Now the book is titled A Match Made in Space, which features a character on the front that looks a lot like Marty in the radiation suit as Darth Vader. Which I hope he didn't use those names, because George Lucas that could have affected a lot.
There's some
that could have really affected a lot of the timeline.
Right. A lot of implications there too.
Those are two very memorable, IPs that were created after 1955.
Yeah.
But I guess if it makes me wonder if George somehow used his experiences with Calvin Klein as inspiration for how he and Lorraine met, as inspiration for his novel.
Yeah.
But apparently. So Biff then hands Marty a pair of keys, saying, "Oh, here you go, Marty. You're all waxed up and ready to go." And Marty's very confused.
Right.
So then he walks out and opens the garage door to reveal the Toyota 4x4 that was his dream car in the original timeline, which apparently is his truck.
Right. Jennifer
then appears, and Marty has missed her, seriously, after this week-long adventure he's been having. But of course, Jennifer doesn't know that he's been gone that long.
Right.
Which I'm wondering, how did she get to his house without her own car, by the way?
She probably walked. I mean, they live pretty close to each other.
I guess. That's just one of those things I've noticed.
Yeah.
So despite his reaction, Marty assures Jennifer that everything is great, and he happily looks back at his parents, with his entire family being much happier in this new alternate reality that he lives in.
Yeah.
So Marty and Jennifer finally go in for a kiss, but they're interrupted once again by the sonic booms of the DeLorean.
Yep.
So Doc frantically pulls the newly modified DeLorean up to Marty's driveway, knocking over garbage cans.
Yep.
And Doc emerges in the brightest yellow outfit you would have ever seen from the future, and the silver pull-down shades. He looks like the wrestler Bret the Hitman Hart.
Nice.
Wearing those. And he rushes over to Marty, saying that he needs to come to the future with him. So Doc is digging through the garbage cans, and Marty asks And when Marty asks what he's doing, he says, "I need fuel." And he opens up the Mr. Fusion port, which apparently creates fuel from garbage and refuse.
That'd be awesome.
I wish we had that now. That would be great. Elon Musk has got to get on that. Come on.
Seriously.
So,
lithium-ion only works so much, and we have to mine that stuff. So
I know. So as Marty is protesting, he's like, "Look, me and Jennifer, we're going to go out for a spin."
Well, bring her along. This concerns her too.
Yeah, Doc urges Marty to bring her along. When Marty asks if something bad has happened to them in the future, Doc denies it and says that this is about her kids.
Yep.
Now, obviously, this reaction was a little bit different than the reshoot they did in part 2. So Doc pulls out of the driveway with Marty and Jennifer, and Marty warns Doc about them not having enough road to get up to 88 miles an hour. So Doc lets them know where they're going, they won't need roads. Then the car begins to hover in midair as the wheels fold, and they take off to their new adventure. Cut to credits as Back in Time plays.
Yep.
So there you go, man. The to be continued caption, that was not in the original release.
Right.
I think that was later added in some of the home video releases.
I think so, yeah.
Because at the time they were not planning on making a sequel.
Oh, which is so hard to believe when you watch it, because why would you put that teaser in?
It seems like some pretty obvious sequel bait.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's also, I mean, a lot of movies back then, they had that ambiguous ending. It's like that kind of it ends that way, just implying that this happens and hoping to plant that seed, but there was no guarantee, obviously. Right. I mean, it's one of those things. It's hard not to see that ending and think they clearly had an idea in mind.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting. I was thinking about the movie for a long time. I've been trying to I like to look at movies and see what message they're trying to convey, because I think all artists have something that they want to say to the general public that maybe other people aren't saying, or that hasn't been said in this particular way. And I was thinking about Back to the Future and what is it saying to us? And I finally came down on, I think it's saying to everybody that the past is important, but it's also important to not get stuck in it. That's one way to look at it, definitely. I can get on board with that. Yeah, and there's a lot of there's a lot of literal metaphors with Marty literally being stuck in the past.
I think there's also something to be said for different generations to to be able to understand each other, and just to understand that at the end of the day we're all human beings. Yeah. We all go through similar things.
That's a good one.
When we're kids. I think the best takeaway is if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. I think that's why Marty McFly was such a character that people like, because he was courageous. And you genuinely rooted for the guy.
Yeah,
and he wasn't overly perfect to the point of being annoying.
Yeah, he wasn't a Gary Stu, if you will.
Exactly. Exactly. And
he was even less of that as he goes on. And it's I watched Back to the Future Part 2 again. I know that's not what the main part of this is, but
oh yeah. Yeah, they added the whole thing in later, nobody calls me chicken.
Yeah. But no, in the when Lorraine is talking about the they're just having their regular conversation. She says your Uncle Joey didn't get parole again in 2015.
Oh yeah, it's wow, this cat is still in jail.
Yeah.
It's what did he do?
Do you want me to tell you, or do you want to read?
No, don't tell me. It's going to ruin the joke.
Right.
I ask a lot of rhetorical questions here sometimes.
Right. But no, there is a comic book that actually goes into detail with it.
Oh, I can't wait to read that.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where this movie was such a huge success that Universal had basically went to Zemeckis and Gale, to the Bobs, and been like, "Look, we're going to make a sequel to this thing with or without you."
Right.
Thankfully, they made the sequels that they did, and the sequels were fantastic.
Absolutely.
I mean, they were wonderful, and I wouldn't mind doing parts 2 and 3 if people want to hear us do it on that show. We'll see people listening to this, if they want to or they want to request us doing another movie, that would be great.
Yeah.
I'd like to go through the just the cast and some of the details while before we close up here. Yeah, the movie was released on July 3rd, 1985, like you said, July 4th weekend.
Yeah.
The budget was $19 million.
Yeah.
Which wasn't too bad in 1985.
Mm.
Like that, adjusted for inflation, it's a respectable number. Like it's not a super high budget, but it's not low either.
Mm-hmm.
The box office take was $388.8 million.
That's
worldwide,
domestic, right? Oh, the worldwide. I know that I was looking at the numbers earlier, and I know that Back to the Future Part 2 had a higher gross internationally, but not domestically. So overall, it didn't do as well as the first one.
Yeah. So Independence Day weekend, that's a big release weekend.
Yeah.
So during the opening week, it earned about $3.6 million. It was the number one film, obviously. Yeah. I think
for several weeks, like it did the unimaginable, and it increased its take from the first week.
Yeah, it beat out Pale Rider, which is a Clint Eastwood film, and Rambo Part 2. So it went ahead of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
And it even outgrossed, like, there was a re-release of E.T.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the fourth weekend it finally fell to number 2, and that was when, like, National Lampoon's European Vacation came out, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That was number 1. But like it was a huge success, and just like internationally it earned about $170.5 million. Yeah, it was the third highest grossing film of the year, behind Out of Africa with Robert Redford and Meryl Streep, and Rocky IV.
Oh wow.
So the worldwide gross was about $381.1 million.
That's great.
So yeah, I guess that was the highest grossing film of 1985 internationally.
Mm-hmm.
Just ahead of Rocky IV and Rambo 2. So Stallone had a great year that year as well.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has such an enduring legacy.
I mean, it's one of those movies. I mean, just all the other impact it had on merchandise and it was like the biggest thing since Star Wars, really, in terms of like how huge it was.
Like it's so big that Avengers Endgame had to go out of its way to like establish that Back to the Future rules were not the time travel rules that they were dealing with.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there have been so many references to it. We could have a whole different podcast on cultural references to Back to the Future and other media. But yeah, man, let's before we close up here, let's go down just like the main cast real quick. So obviously Michael J. Fox. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at his filmography. He had been in a couple movies before then, just like Midnight Madness and Class of 1984. Mm-hmm. But like Back to the Future was out before Teen Wolf. I guess they both came out the same year.
Oh wow. Yeah, I think Teen Wolf has to have been like shot before and then.
Probably, yeah. But I mean, the release predated Teen Wolf. I believe. Let me just check on that. It was that same summer.
Oh, crazy.
So, yeah, Michael J. Fox was having a great year.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Between being on Family Ties and all that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you couldn't imagine anyone else playing the role of Marty McFly. I mean, what he brought to it was it was great.
Yeah.
No, and Christopher Lloyd, obviously, it was the biggest role he had since when he was in Taxi. Mm-hmm. That was it. Yeah, he was Reverend Jim in Taxi.
Nice.
Before that, so he was already like pretty much well known. Besides that,
right?
And of course, later he would do Clue and Star Trek III: The Search for Spock.
Yeah, my favorite
later
Martian.
on would do. Yeah, and later the Addams Family as Uncle Fester.
Nice.
And Leah Thompson, she was in Red Dawn, I think a year before that.
Right. And she did Howard the Duck, I think, after this one, which is that's a remake that needs to be done.
Yeah, she had done All the Right Moves with Tom Cruise, and Red Dawn she was in with C. Thomas Howell, who almost played Marty McFly in this one.
Who did he end up playing? C. Thomas Howell?
he wasn't in the movie, but Billy Zane was.
Okay.
Yeah, Billy Zane was he was one of the guys in Biff's gang.
Right.
He was Match, I think.
Yeah.
Because he was always like chewing on a matchstick.
Mhm.
That's why they called him that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Billy Zane was in that. It was years before Titanic and all that.
Right.
Crispin Glover.
Oh yeah.
He was in here. Now, he wasn't in Back to the Futures 2 and 3 because he was just such a pain in the ass to deal with.
I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, Bob Zemeckis, like, they just did not get along on set. And I mean,
this is something that I wanted to bring up too. That he actually did an interview with Nerdist with what's his name, Chris something.
Chris Hardwick.
Yeah, Chris Hardwick. And he talked about how like he had a real big problem with the ending of Back to the Future, and that it seemed like because they had new and nicer things, that like that's what made them happy. And so
I know
he wasn't a big fan of how it ended up that way, and
thought it was too materialistic. And to that I'd say, shut up, Crispin.
Right.
Like, what are you even talking about, dude? Like, you're a Hollywood actor. Like, don't lecture us about materialism.
Yeah.
You freaking idiot. So whatever.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, like, which is such a lousy take to have on it. Actually, though, Eric Stoltz had a pretty good point about like the end of the movie, where it's like, technically, at the end of the movie, like Marty has this entire life that he has no memory of.
Right.
Like they never come out and say it, but it's like, does Marty have any memories of this alternate life that like he would have lived?
Like he doesn't have any memories of the alternate life in the sequels.
Right.
Like the bad one.
Do you think maybe eventually, as he lives his life, eventually it comes? It's got to maybe trigger something to him.
I think it's a temporal displacement. Where because he was the one that changed things, he's the one that remembers how things were, and so he has to, figure out how everything actually happens in this.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that eventually he would gain some memories of this different timeline.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that would be pretty depressing.
A little, but
yeah.
At the same time, it's like, he's a lot happier. His family's a lot happier, so
yeah,
can't complain too much, right? And he still has,
which is pretty good. I mean, and like things are relatively the same. Like he still has his brother and sister.
Mm-hmm.
He was still born at the same time.
Right.
He still has Jennifer. He still, it kind of proves that theory of like, time travel. I think it's best when it has those, rules where it's kind of like a river, where it's like you can throw a rock into a river. There might be some ripples, but ultimately things have a way of course correcting. Even if you drop like a giant like boulder in there, yeah, it might have some ripples here and there, but things have a way of working themselves out.
Definitely.
It's not like in DC Comics where like they had Flashpoint where it's like one little thing was changed and it was a total butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Which
made for a great story, but as far as time travel goes, it's a little too much.
Yeah, I wasn't even a fan of that story, to be honest. But that's another podcast. And yeah, so Crispin Glover, he wasn't in parts 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
They ended up using his likeness without his permission, so he sued for it.
Right.
Which I can't really blame him for that. Like, yeah, like I get it, And Thomas F. Wilson was just great as Biff.
Oh, perfect.
He went on to have a really good career as a voiceover artist.
Nice.
Yeah, like he was in the Back to the Future animated series, which is a personal favorite of mine.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. I never watched it growing up.
Oh, when I was a little kid, like that came on, and I just thought that was great. That was part of like what won me over, because I also I think McDonald's had like some toys based on like the animated series, and I had a few of those.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was like about 6 or 7 when that came on. The show came on in 1991 and 92, and was like kind of continued some of the stuff we saw in part 3. You had Clara and Jules and Verne and the Time Train and all that stuff. So it was like an unofficial sequel.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty cool.
It was produced by Gale and Zemeckis, right?
Yeah. And Christopher Lloyd did like live action segments as Doc.
Nice.
And it also happened to be the first public appearance of Bill Nye.
Oh, wow, no way.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So go back and check Back to the Future, the
I
animated
will.
series, if you haven't. It's not streaming anywhere, but like you can get
I
it
have it.
on. Yeah, if you have the DVD or whatever it is at home, like you can watch it. But Thomas F. Wilson, he was great, and he's a stand-up comedian and a musician. And
Nice.
Claudia Wells played Jennifer,
Mm-hmm.
and she was not able to come back for the sequels either.
Yeah.
So they recast her as Elizabeth Shue,
Mm-hmm.
who was already she was already pretty famous by that point because of the Karate Kid and Adventures of Babysitting.
Right.
So they had to reshoot scenes from like the end of Back to the Future 1 as the beginning of Back to the Future 2. They had to reshoot those scenes.
That's why they didn't just use the.
Yeah, because Elizabeth Shue was now playing Jennifer.
Right. I've never noticed the difference. They look just alike to me.
Yeah, like I mean, it's obvious now as an adult watching it, but like as a kid, like you never really thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they had Mark McClure play Dave.
Yep.
The older brother, and Wendy Jo Sperber, the actress who played Linda. Unfortunately, she passed away from breast cancer in 2005. So that's a drag. But she was in Bachelor Party and a couple of other movies as well.
Right.
And of course, they had Huey Lewis cameoing as the judge, one of the teachers. Yep. And
you see the judge. I think of Judge Dredd, Huey Lewis, and I can imagine him in that outfit and just going, "You kids are just too darn loud."
Yeah. And we mentioned James Tolkien and some of the and Donald Fullilove as Goldie Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And Billy Zane as one of the guys in Biff's gang.
Yeah.
So there you go, man. I know this has been a long one, but we went through the movie beat by beat.
Yep.
Kind of commented, and honestly, like even though we comment on some of the ridiculous things, like it's still a great movie. It's still very watchable. It holds up.
Oh
honestly.
Yeah. Like even a lot of the effects still hold up. Like there's
Yeah, like the only one that was a little bit dicey was when like Marty was kind of fading from existence,
mm-hmm.
but they were kind of running out of the budget at that point. So, but it still works for me. Like there's nothing to
mm-hmm.
Besides the questions I asked about like Marty remembering this new timeline.
Right.
Yeah. Besides that, I don't really bump into much else.
Yeah.
Like they say it's a perfect movie, and like I don't know if there's any such thing as a perfect movie, but
mm-hmm.
this is pretty close.
Yeah, I agree.
So. This is awesome, man. Thanks for doing this with me, Gabe.
Yeah,
and,
thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to do it anytime, especially for the sequels.
For sure.
Future Part 2, I can talk about that one for hours.
Yeah, which, if we do Part 2, I'll have to have you on there, because I know it's, that was my first exposure to Back to the Future as well. Yeah, was seeing the second one first.
Yeah, it's quite literally my favorite movie of all time.
There you go.
Follow close, like, it oscillates between that one and Man of Steel.
Man of Steel's good.
But yeah, the Back to the Future Part 2 anytime it's on, like I always have to complete it.
It's a classic in every sense of the word. All right, man. Well, I'll let you go, but thank you guys for tuning in as always. Feel free to check out our band. Me and Gabe are in a band called the Butterfly Wings. Check us out, Facebook.com/90s Butterfly Wings. We are a 90s tribute band.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also check out my original band, Vertebraker, at Facebook.com/Vertebraker Band. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at jackxconnor. I'll leave all the links in the description. Gabe, where can they find you online?
Just look up Gabe Vermund on Instagram and on Facebook. And
you can also check out our Linkin Park tribute band, New Divide.
Yep, at New Divide Band on Facebook.
Yeah. That's right.
And then there's an Instagram.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely have all the links in the description. But thank you guys as always for tuning in. This has been the Phoenix Report. For Gabe Vermund, I'm Jack Connor saying we'll see you in the future.
See ya.